Hey guys, tonight we trace the impossible moment when your ancestors stopped merely surviving and started feeling. When neurons fired in patterns that had never existed before, and suddenly there was someone home behind those ancient eyes. You're about to crawl back through 100,000 years of darkness, feeling your way along cave walls still warm from fires that died before writing was invented. Fair warning, you probably won't survive this emotionally intact, because we're going to poke at every tender nerve your species ever developed, from the first flicker of self-awareness to the quiet resignation that lets you finally sleep at night. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love imagining this story rippling across time zones. Someone in Tokyo drifting off while someone in Buenos Aires just settles into their pillow. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake in darkness so complete it feels like a texture against your skin. This isn't the darkness of a power outage or a moonless camping trip. This is the primordial black that existed before humans learned to push it back with fire. The kind of darkness that swallows your hand when you hold it 6 inches from your face. You're in a cave, though you don't have a word for cave yet. You don't have words for anything. The rough stone beneath your body has absorbed enough of your heat to feel almost comfortable, and the air carries the mineral tang of ancient water filtering through limestone, mixed with the musk of bodies pressed close together. Around you, others breathe. You can hear them shifting, the occasional grunt or sigh that means nothing and everything. These are your people, though that concept exists only as a felt sense, not a category. You know them the way you know your own hunger, immediately without reflection. But tonight something stirs differently in the cavity of your chest. You've woken before, countless times. Every night since you were born you've drifted through sleep and surfaced again into wakefulness. But this time, as your eyes open to the unchanging black, there's a flicker of something unprecedented happening between your ears. It's subtle at first, just a strange doubling, like an echo in a canyon that shouldn't have walls. You're awake, yes, but for the first time, you're aware that you're awake. You feel yourself feeling the cold. You notice yourself noticing the darkness. Historians still argue whether this kind of recursive self-awareness emerged gradually over millennia, or sparked suddenly in isolated individuals who then couldn't explain it to anyone else. Imagine being the first person to experience consciousness recognizing itself. You'd have no framework, no language, no reassurance that you weren't losing your mind. There'd just be this vertiginous sense of being both the watcher and the watched. Your heart rate climbs slightly, though you don't know why. The sensation in your chest isn't quite fear. You know fear. The useful kind that makes you freeze when shadows move wrong or run when you smell predator musk. This is different. This is closer to pressure, like something inside you has suddenly become too large for its container. You press your palm against your sternum and feel the rhythm there, and in that moment, you realize something extraordinary. The hand feeling the heartbeat and the heart being felt belong to the same creature, and that creature is you. Here's a quirky tidbit that might make you smile even as it unnerves you. Some researchers believe that early humans may have touched their own chests constantly during this period of emerging self-awareness, not understanding why they were compelled to confirm their own existence through tactile feedback. If you've ever caught yourself with your hand over your heart during a moment of stress, you might be echoing a gesture that's been passed down for 100,000 years. The cave offers no comfort for this new sensation. You shift, and the movement feels strange now, deliberate in a way it never was before. Previously you moved the way water moves downhill, following instinct and necessity without commentary. Now there's a tiny narrator in your skull, a witness to your own actions, and honestly, it's kind of annoying. You reach out in the darkness and your fingers find the familiar warmth of another body. Your mother, perhaps, or a sibling. The touch should be soothing. It has always been soothing before. But now you feel the separation between your skin and theirs with new clarity. You are here, they are there. There's a boundary, invisible but absolute, that keeps you locked inside yourself. This is loneliness, though you won't know to call it that for thousands of generations. Tonight, in this cave, you only know that you feel different. Something has shifted in the architecture of your experience, and you can't go back to the simpler way of being. You're stuck with yourself now, for better or worse. The prehistoric brain that carried your ancestors through millions of years of evolution wasn't built for this kind of introspection. It was optimized for pattern recognition, threat detection, and social bonding. All the practical skills that keep a relatively weak, slow, clawless primate alive in a world full of things with sharper teeth. Consciousness, in the sense we're talking about tonight, might have been an accident, a byproduct of brains getting complex enough to model their environment, until one day they got complex enough to model themselves. And once that happened, once the first human mind turned its attention inward and found someone looking back, everything changed. You lie very still in the darkness, listening to your own breathing. In, out. The rhythm that has sustained you since birth now seems almost miraculous, a mechanical process that somehow produces the experience of being alive. You didn't ask for this awareness, you don't even know what to do with it. But it's yours now, this flicker of self-recognition, this burden and gift of knowing that you exist. Outside the cave, the world continues its ancient patterns. Stars wheel overhead that you'll never see from this deep in the earth. Predators hunt and prey fleas. Somewhere, a river carves a new channel through stone that will take centuries to notice the change. None of it knows you're here, developing the first glimmers of what will eventually become philosophy, art, anxiety disorders, and late-night YouTube videos about feelings. But you don't need to know any of that yet. For now, you just need to breathe, to feel your hand on your chest, to let this new awareness settle into your bones like warmth from a fire you haven't yet learned to build. The others around you sleep easily, unburdened by reflection. You envy them a little, though you don't have a word for envy either. Mostly, you just feel tired. Tired in a new way that has nothing to do with physical exertion and everything to do with the strange work of being conscious of your own consciousness. Eventually your eyelids grow heavy again. The darkness presses in like a blanket and your breathing slows. The last thought before sleep takes you isn't really a thought at all. It's more like a question without words, a wondering about what you are and why you're here. It won't be answered tonight. It won't be answered in your lifetime. In some ways, it still hasn't been answered, even now, even as you listen to this from whatever corner of the world has become your cave. But that's okay. The question itself is the beginning of everything. The question is proof that you're awake. The first thing you notice is the smell, a rank, musky thickness that coats the back of your throat before your eyes even make sense of the shadow separating from the tree line. Your body responds before your mind catches up. That ancient cascade of chemicals flooding your system in a pattern perfected over millions of years of prey, animals learning to run. But tonight, something different happens alongside the usual freeze response. Tonight, as the predator's shape clarifies into something with too many teeth and shoulders too wide, and eyes that catch the dying firelight like wet stones, you feel the fear not just as a physical imperative, but as an experience. You know you're afraid, and that knowing changes everything. Your ancestors encountered predators constantly. That's not new. The African savanna and the forests beyond were filled with things that viewed early humans as mobile protein sources. Big cats, hyenas, crocodiles near the water, snakes in the grass. Evolution etched survival responses deep into the brainstem, circuits so old they predate primates entirely. When threat appears, heart rate spikes, pupils dilate, blood flows to major muscle groups, and you either fight, flee or freeze depending on which option your unconscious calculus determines gives you the best odds. It's automatic, it's elegant, and for millions of years it worked just fine without anyone needing to be aware of what was happening. But now you're standing at the edge of your camp, having wandered too far while gathering wood, and the shape emerging from the darkness is almost certainly a leopard. Historians still argue whether leopards or cave lions posed the greater threat to early human groups, but right now that debate feels extremely academic, and for the first time in the history of your lineage, you're watching your own terror unfold like you're somehow both participant and audience. The fear has a taste, metallic, like blood that hasn't been spilled yet. It has a sound, the roar of your own pulse in your ears, drowning out the night insects that went silent the moment the predator appeared. It has a weight, pressing down on your chest and making each breath feel like a negotiation. And it has a texture in your thoughts, a frantic quality that jumps from one incomplete plan to another. Run, climb, scream for help, play dead, without landing on any of them long enough to act. Here's something you probably didn't know. Early humans may have been particularly susceptible to predation, precisely because of their developing consciousness. Animals operating purely on instinct tend to respond faster. They don't second guess. They don't get caught in loops of meta-awareness. A gazelle doesn't stand there contemplating the experience of being afraid while a lion closes the distance. But you, tonight, your brand new ability to observe your own mental states is actually slowing you down, adding processing steps that evolution never intended. The leopard moves closer. It's in no hurry. It's noticed that you're frozen, and predators are very good at reading body language. Your stillness broadcasts vulnerability, invites approach. You want to run. Every cell in your body is screaming for you to run, but your legs have disconnected from your intentions, locked in place by a freeze response that doesn't care about your conscious preferences. And then something happens that will echo through the rest of human history. The fear, instead of dissipating when you neither run nor fight, begins to transform. It loops back on itself, feeding on your awareness of it, growing into something larger and more terrible than the simple survival instinct it began as. You're not just afraid of the leopard now. You're afraid of being afraid. You're afraid of the fact that your body has betrayed you, that your legs won't move, that you might die here in the dark and no one will know what happened. The fear has become abstract, existential, self-referential. You've invented anxiety. Congratulations! It's going to be a very popular condition. A branch cracks somewhere behind you. One of your clan members, probably woken by your absence, come to investigate. The sound breaks the spell. The leopard's attention flicks toward the new noise, calculating whether one frozen human is worth the risk of engaging multiple. In that moment of distraction, your legs finally unlock, and you stumble backward toward the camp, not running exactly, but retreating with all the grace of a newborn deer. The leopard doesn't pursue. It melts back into the shadows, deciding that tonight's hunt requires easier prey. You'll never know how close you came to becoming a statistic, one of the many early humans who simply disappeared into the darkness and were never seen again. What you will know, what you'll carry with you from this night forward, is the memory of your own terror. Not just that you were afraid, but that you were aware of being afraid, that you watched yourself come apart under pressure and couldn't do anything to stop it. This is the gift and the curse of consciousness recognizing fear. You can learn from it, adapt to it, prepare for it in ways that purely instinctual creatures cannot. But you also can't escape it the way they can. The gazelle that survives a lion attack goes back to grazing almost immediately, its stress hormones clearing within minutes, no nightmares waiting for it in sleep. You, standing now in the relative safety of your camp, while your clan members gather around you with concerned grunts, you're going to carry this moment. Tomorrow, and the day after, and possibly for the rest of your life, the memory of that leopard's eyes in the firelight will surface at unexpected moments, making your heart race and your palms sweat even when there's no threat present. You've discovered trauma, another very popular human experience. The fire in the centre of camp has burned low, but someone adds fuel, and the flames climb higher, pushing the darkness back. You sit closer than you normally would, letting the heat wash over you, watching the shadows dance at the edge of the light. Your clan members don't understand what happened to you out there. They've all had close calls with predators. That's simply part of life. But they sense that something is different. They hover nearby, offering what comfort they can through proximity and touch. And slowly, as your heartbeat settles and the chemical flood recedes, you begin to process what you experienced. Not in words, because you still don't have words for any of this, but in feelings that have weight and colour and meaning. The world has revealed itself to be more dangerous than you knew, not because the predators have changed, but because your relationship to danger has changed. You can anticipate it now. You can imagine future attacks before they happen, rehearse them in your mind, feel the fear of things that haven't occurred yet. This is imagination, and it's growing alongside your awareness of your own emotions. Together they're going to build civilizations, temples to appease the predators you imagine in the sky, walls to keep out the threats you can now anticipate, weapons to fight back against a world that suddenly seems much less indifferent than it used to. But tonight, you don't know any of that. Tonight you just know that you're alive, and that you are almost not alive, and that the difference between those two states feels more significant than anything you've experienced before. The fire crackles. Your clan settles around you. Somewhere in the darkness, the leopard has found other prey or given up hunting entirely, gone to sleep in whatever place leopards sleep when they're done being nightmares. You close your eyes, but the image of those eyes catching the firelight stays with you. It's going to stay with you for a long time. And in the staying, in the way this single moment of terror loops and repeats and demands to be processed, you're laying the groundwork for everything from religious sacrifice to horror movies, from anxiety medication to exposure therapy. Fear, once it becomes conscious of itself, refuses to be simply survived. It insists on being understood. You're not there yet. You're nowhere close to understanding, but you've taken the first step down that very long road. Morning arrives the way it always does in this era. Gradually, then all at once, as the sun clears the horizon and floods the landscape with light that seems almost aggressive after the thick darkness you've survived. Your eyes adjust reluctantly. Your body aches from sleeping curled tight near the fire, muscles that spent all night prepared for flight only now beginning to unclench. But something else is happening in your belly, something that demands attention in a way that surprises you with its specificity. You're hungry, yes. That's nothing new. Hunger has been your most constant companion since birth. The familiar emptiness that drives you to forage, to hunt, to tear into whatever calories cross your path. But this morning, the hunger has a shape. It's not just wanting food, it's wanting particular food. Somewhere in the strange new architecture of your developing mind, a memory has surfaced. Sweet, fleshy fruit from a tree you passed days ago, juice running down your chin, the way the tartness made your mouth water in a way dried meat never does. And suddenly, generalized hunger has become specific craving. This is desire, and it's going to get you into so much trouble over the next 100,000 years. You stand, stretching muscles still stiff from yesterday's terror, and begin walking. Not toward the nearest food source, which would be the sensible survival choice, but toward the memory of that fruit tree, which is at least half a day's journey in the wrong direction. Your clan members watch you go with confusion. Why would anyone expend calories travelling away from known resources? But some of them follow anyway, their own curiosity piqued by your purposeful stride. Here's a quirky tidbit that researchers love to debate. The development of specific food preferences may have driven more technological innovation than pure survival needs ever did. When you're just trying not to starve, any calorie source will do. But when you start craving particular tastes and textures, you develop methods, fermenting, smoking, combining ingredients, that go far beyond simple sustenance. Some anthropologists argue that cooking itself wasn't invented to make food safer or more digestible, but because someone, somewhere, wanted their meat to taste better. Desire, not necessity, as the mother of invention. The landscape unfolds around you as you walk. savanna giving way to patches of forest, dry stream beds marking where water flowed in wetter seasons. You've travelled this route before, but today it looks different somehow, coloured by anticipation. Your mind keeps returning to that fruit tree, elaborating on the memory, making it more vivid with each repetition. The fruit was perfectly ripe when you found it last time. Will it still be there? Will it have spoiled or been eaten by others? The uncertainty adds a strange edge to your wanting, a nervousness that feels almost like the fear from last night, but pointed in a completely different direction. You're experiencing anticipation, which is just anxiety dressed up for a party, and it's changing your relationship to time itself. Previously, you existed primarily in the present. This moment, this hunger, this danger, this comfort. The past was a vague impression, the future barely a concept. But wanting something specific requires imagining a future where you have it, and that imagination creates a kind of time travel, pulling you forward through hours that haven't happened yet, making the present feel like an obstacle rather than a destination. The sun climbs higher, your feet find familiar paths between the trees. Behind you, your clan members keep pace, some grumbling about the unnecessary journey, others caught up in the strange excitement that seems to have infected the group. They don't understand what's driving you, you barely understand what's driving you, but something about your certainty is compelling. You move with purpose, and purpose is magnetic. When you finally reach the tree, your heart does something complicated in your chest. The fruit is there, heavy on the branches, exactly as you remembered it. But your memory has been working over time during the journey, and the reality now has to compete with an idealized version that may never have existed. You reach up, pluck one of the fruits, and bite into it with an eagerness that feels almost desperate. It's good. It's really good, actually, sweet and tart and perfectly ripe, juice running down your chin exactly as you imagined. But here's the thing that no one warned you about. The thing that's going to haunt your species for the rest of its existence. The fruit is good, but it's not as good as you imagined it would be. The anticipation created expectations that reality can't quite match. The wanting was, in some ways, more satisfying than the having. This is the hedonic treadmill, and you've just taken your first steps onto a machine that never stops spinning. You eat more fruit anyway, filling your belly until the hunger subsides and something like satisfaction settles in. But there's a residue, a faint disappointment that you don't have words for, a sense that maybe you should have wanted something else, something better, something that exists only in the realm of imagination and never has to submit to the limitations of reality. Your clan members are eating too, happily oblivious to your existential fruit crisis, enjoying the unexpected bounty without comparing it to some idealized version that never existed. You envy them for a moment, their simpler relationship to satisfaction, before remembering that envy is next on our list, and you haven't discovered it properly yet. For now, you just sit beneath the tree, sticky with juice, trying to understand why getting what you wanted doesn't feel the way you expected getting what you wanted to feel. The afternoon passes slowly. You gather more fruit than you can carry, knowing that it will spoil before you can eat it all but unable to stop yourself from hoarding. This too is new. This concern for future hunger, this attempt to stockpile pleasure against the inevitable return of want. Your ancestors took what they needed and left the rest, trusting that the world would continue to provide. But you, with your new capacity for desire and anticipation, you're already preparing for scarcity that hasn't arrived yet. You're already worried about tomorrow's hunger, while your belly is still full from today's feast. Some historians argue that this shift from immediate consumption to future planning was the seed of agriculture, of civilization, of everything we've built since. The ability to want something specific, remember where to find it, and delay gratification long enough to cultivate it. This is what separates settlements from wandering, cities from camps, humans from the other great apes who are smart enough to use tools, but never quite restless enough to reshape the world in their own image. But all of that is still far in the future. Tonight, you make camp beneath the fruit tree, belly full but mind strangely unsettled. The fire crackles, the stars emerge, your clan members settle into sleep around you, satisfied in ways you can't quite access anymore, and you lie awake, not from fear this time, but from something harder to name. A restlessness, a wanting that doesn't have an object, a sense that satisfaction is always one step ahead, retreating as you approach. This is the price of desire. It never really goes away. It just changes targets, finding new objects to fixate on the moment old ones are achieved. You wanted the fruit, you got the fruit, and now you want what? Something else. Something more. Something better. The specific target matters less than the wanting itself, which has become a permanent feature of your inner landscape, a hunger that food can never fully satisfy. You close your eyes, but sleep comes slowly. The sweetness lingers on your tongue, already becoming a memory, already being idealized for future wanting. Tomorrow you'll journey back to your usual territory, and this tree will fade into the catalogue of places you might return to someday, might crave again when the ordinary fruits of home seem suddenly insufficient. Welcome to desire. Population, everyone who came after you. Estimated departure time, never. The body lies at the edge of camp and you cannot stop looking at it. Someone you knew, someone whose warmth you pressed against during cold nights, whose breathing was part of the ambient soundtrack of your existence. Now still, now cooling, now becoming something other than what they were. You've seen death before. Death is constant in this world, as familiar as hunger or sunrise. But something has changed in how you're seeing it. Some shift in perception that transforms biological fact into unbearable weight. You're grieving, and grief makes no evolutionary sense at all. Think about it from a coldly practical perspective. The person is gone. The resources they consumed are now available for others. The group dynamic will adjust, responsibilities will redistribute, and within a generation it will be as if they never existed. This is how death works for most social animals. A brief disruption, a period of adjustment, then life continuing its relentless forward motion. Elephants linger at their dead and seem to mourn, yes, and some cetaceans carry deceased calves for days, but these behaviours fade. The living return to the business of living. But you're standing at the edge of camp as the morning light reveals what the night took, and you feel something tearing in your chest that doesn't correspond to any physical injury. The person on the ground is beyond helping, beyond needing anything at all, but you need something from them. What? Presence? Continuation? The impossible reversal of what has happened. You don't have words for any of this. You only have the ache, spreading through you like cold water, making everything else seem distant and unimportant. Historians still argue whether early humans practiced burial rites because they believed in an afterlife, or simply because they couldn't bear to leave their dead exposed to scavengers. Either explanation speaks to the same underlying reality. Something in the human mind rebels against death in a way that purely instinctual creatures don't seem to experience. We want our dead to matter, to be treated as more than discarded biology, and that wanting suggests we've already started to believe that identity persists beyond the body. You crouch beside the cooling form and touch their face, as if contact might convey something across the impossible gulf that's open between you. The skin feels wrong, familiar texture made foreign by the absence behind it. This person smiled at you, shared food with you, helped drive off predators and build shelters and all the 1,000 small collaborations that make survival possible. And now they're just matter, just weight, just a shape that used to contain someone and doesn't anymore. Here's a quirky tidbit that might comfort you or unsettle you depending on your relationship with mortality. Some researchers believe that the experience of grief may have evolved specifically to strengthen social bonds among the living. When you grieve, others see your attachment and trust you more. Communities that mourn together develop deeper loyalties than those that treat death purely practically. Your pain right now, incomprehensible and useless as it feels, might be serving a social function that will help your clan survive long after this loss has faded from active memory. But knowing that doesn't help with the ache. Understanding the evolutionary purpose of an emotion has never once made that emotion easier to bear. You're still crouching by the body, still feeling the enormity of absence, still wondering why the world keeps turning when something so significant has stopped. Others in your clan begin to stir, approaching the death with their own responses. Some seem to share your strange new depth of feeling. They hover close, making sounds that aren't quite language but carry clear emotional weight. Others seem less affected, more practical, already thinking about what happens next. You notice these differences without judging them, aware somehow that grief comes in many shapes, and not everyone needs to drown in it the way you seem to be drowning. The day proceeds with an odd quality, like reality has been wrapped in cloth. You help move the body, somewhere, you don't know where exactly, somewhere that feels right for reasons you can't articulate. The weight surprises you. Death has made them heavier, or maybe you're just weaker than usual, drained by the effort of feeling so much. When the body is finally laid to rest, you stand at the site for a long time after others have drifted away, not praying exactly because prayer doesn't exist yet, but doing something that will eventually become prayer, directing attention toward the unknown, asking questions that can't be answered, hoping for something beyond hope. What surprises you most is how the grief persists. You expected it to fade quickly, the way fear fades once the predator leaves, the way hunger fades once you eat. But this loss has its own timeline, its own stubborn presence. Days pass and you still look for the deceased in their usual places, still expect to hear their sounds among the familiar noises of the clan. Your mind hasn't updated its model of the world, keeps generating predictions based on a reality that no longer exists. And each time you're reminded of the truth, they're not there, they're never going to be there again. The ache renews itself, fresh as the first morning. Some scholars believe that this persistent quality of grief was a cognitive bug that became a feature. The same mental mechanisms that allow humans to maintain relationships with absent allies, essential for complex social cooperation, also make it impossible to fully release the dead. We remember them because we're built to remember, and the remembering hurts because attachment always has teeth. You begin to notice changes in yourself that seem connected to the loss. Colours are dimmer, food has less flavour. The usual pleasures and concerns of daily life feel flattened, like someone has turned down the volume on experience itself. This is depression, probably, or at least its ancestral precursor, the way the brain responds to loss by dampening overall engagement with the world. It's protective in a sense, keeping you from investing too much energy in a reality that has proven capable of taking away what matters. But it doesn't feel protective. It feels like punishment, like the world is retaliating against your capacity to care. As days stretch into what might be weeks, the grief begins its long, slow transformation. Not fading exactly, but changing texture, becoming less acute and more ambient. You can function again, can hunt and gather and participate in the rhythms of survival. But there's a new layer to your experience now, a background awareness that everything is temporary, that everyone you care about will eventually become a cooling body at the edge of camp, that love and loss are not opposites, but partners in a dance that neither can escape. This knowledge will fuel religions, inspire art, drive humans to build monuments that outlast individual lifespans. The terror of grief and the desperate need to mean something in the face of inevitable ending will shape civilizations you can't imagine from your vantage point in prehistory. But for now, you just sit with the feeling, letting it be whatever it needs to be, learning the hard way that some emotions can't be solved, only survived. The fire burns low, the stars emerge. Somewhere in the darkness the world continues its ancient patterns, indifferent to your loss, indifferent to all loss. and you add another stick to the flames, watching the sparks rise toward the infinite, wondering if anything at all persists beyond this brief bright moment of being alive. The sound escapes your throat before you understand what's happening, a sharp, stuttering exhalation that shakes your whole body, that seems to come from some deep place you didn't know existed. Your clan members freeze, staring at you with concern that borders on alarm. The sound is strange, unprecedented, somewhere between a bark and a cry. But you're not in danger, and you're not sad. If anything, you feel lighter than you have in days, maybe weeks, since the grief first settled into your bones. You're laughing, and no one has any idea what to make of it. The trigger was absurd. One of the younger clan members reached for a fruit, overbalanced and tumbled backward with a look of surprised dignity that your brain somehow found hilarious. The fruit flew out of their grasp, arced through the air, and landed squarely on the head of an older member who'd been napping nearby. The sequence of events, the reaching, the falling, the surprised face, the fruit's improbable trajectory, the drowsy victim's confusion upon waking, assembled itself into something greater than its parts, and your nervous system responded with this strange new convulsion. Here's the thing that makes laughter genuinely mysterious. Nobody really knows why it evolved. Smiling, sure, that's a primate dominant signal that got repurposed for social bonding. Crying serves clear emotional and communicative functions. But laughter, the uncontrollable expulsion of air, the contortion of facial muscles, the temporary loss of bodily control. Scholars have proposed dozens of theories over the years, and historians still argue whether humour originated as a relief response to false alarms, a social bonding mechanism, or something else entirely. What's clear is that you're experiencing it now, and it feels almost as overwhelming as grief did, but in the opposite direction. Energy is pouring through you, shaking you from the inside out, and you have no way to stop it even if you wanted to. The sound you're making catches on, spreading to one clan member, then another, until half the group is convulsing with this new noise, none of them entirely sure what's funny, but all of them unable to resist the contagion. This is one of the strangest things about laughter. It's social in a way that other emotions aren't. Fear spreads through groups, yes, and so does aggression, but those are useful for survival, coordinated threat response, collective defense. Laughter has no obvious survival benefit. The person who fell isn't injured. The person who got hit with the fruit is confused but unharmed. Nothing has been accomplished by the group spending several minutes incapacitated with mirth, energy expended, bellies sore from muscular contractions that serve no functional purpose. And yet, when the laughter finally subsides, something has shifted. The tension that's been gripping your clan since the recent death has loosened somehow. People are looking at each other differently, touching more casually, moving with greater ease. The absurdity of a fruit hitting someone's head has somehow processed emotional residue that serious conversation could never have reached. You wipe your eyes, because yes, laughter has made you cry, which is a whole other layer of physiological confusion, and try to understand what just happened. The person who fell is looking at you with a mixture of embarrassment and something else, something warmer. By laughing at their mishap, you've communicated something, that you see them, that you're paying attention, that their presence in the world matters enough to provoke a reaction. The humour was at their expense, but it was also a form of intimacy. You don't laugh at strangers, you don't laugh at threats. You laugh at people who are close enough to embarrass themselves in front of you, and trust that the laughing won't become cruelty. Here's a quirky tidbit that scientists find endlessly fascinating. Babies laugh before they can speak, sometimes as young as 4 months old. Whatever humour is, it seems to be more fundamental than language, more basic than abstract thought. Peekaboo, the sudden appearance of a face when nothing was expected, triggers the same response in infants across all cultures. Something about violated expectations, safely resolved, tickles a circuit in the brain that predates almost everything else we consider uniquely human. The afternoon continues, but the mood has transformed. Someone deliberately imitates the original fall, exaggerating it for comic effect, and another wave of laughter rolls through the group. Then someone else pretends to be hit by an invisible fruit, and the laughter doubles. You're watching the birth of performance, of comedy as an intentional practice. The realization that if accidental absurdity feels this good, maybe absurdity can be manufactured. This will eventually become theatre, stand-up comedy, sitcoms, memes. The first human to make another human laugh on purpose had no idea what they were starting. They just knew that the sound and the sensation were addictive, that creating them in others felt almost as good as experiencing them yourself. Humour becomes currency, status, a survival skill in its own right. The person who can make the clan laugh will be forgiven other shortcomings, will be protected, will be kept around even when resources are scarce. Jesters will advise kings because the ability to provoke laughter implies the ability to see clearly, to notice what others miss. But for now, in the fading light of a prehistoric afternoon, you're just sitting with your clan members in the aftermath of unexpected joy. Your stomach hurts from the contractions, your face aches from the unfamiliar configuration. Your mood, which has been so heavy for so long, feels somehow lighter, like grief and laughter have been wrestling for territory and laughter has won around. Someone makes another joke, or what passes for a joke in a world without language, just an exaggerated gesture, a silly face, and you feel the laughter building again. You let it come, not understanding what it is, only knowing that it feels necessary, like something your body has been waiting to do without knowing how. The fire gets built, the evening meal prepared, the stars emerge one by one. But the clan moves differently tonight, with more ease, more connection. Death is still real, still waiting somewhere in the darkness. But so is this other thing, this mysterious capacity for finding lightness in the heavy world, for transforming absurdity into bonding, for laughing together at the cosmic joke of being alive. You didn't know you could feel this. You're beginning to suspect there's a lot you don't know about what you can feel. The fire burns warm against your face, surrounded by clan members on all sides, and yet you feel a cold hollowness spreading through your chest that has nothing to do with temperature. Bodies press close, for warmth, for protection, for the simple comfort of proximity. But the pressing doesn't reach whatever's aching inside you. You're right here, part of the group, participating in the eternal human ritual of huddling together against the darkness. And somehow, inexplicably, you've never felt more alone. This is loneliness, and it's different from being alone. Being alone is a physical state, spatial separation from others, something your ancestors experienced regularly and mostly survived without emotional drama. Loneliness is a psychological state, and it can bloom in the middle of a crowded camp just as easily as in isolation, maybe more easily. Because loneliness isn't about the absence of people, it's about the absence of connection, and you can be surrounded by your entire species and still feel like the only one of your kind. The realization creeps up slowly, the growing awareness that the others around you don't see what you see, don't feel what you feel, don't have access to the strange interior landscape that's been developing inside your skull since that night you first woke up aware. They laugh and you laugh too, but your laughter comes from a different place. They grieve and you grieve too, but your grief has extra layers they don't seem to experience. You're diverging from the group in ways that no one, including you, has language to describe. Historians still argue about when loneliness became a significant human experience. Some believe it emerged alongside consciousness itself, that self-awareness necessarily creates a sense of separation, of being fundamentally locked inside one's own perspective. Others think loneliness is more recent, a product of social structures that grew larger than the small, intimate bands we evolved to live in. But whatever its origins, you're feeling it now, acute and uncomfortable and completely bewildering. Now, here's the paradox that will haunt philosophers for millennia. Consciousness makes connection possible. You can't truly love someone you can't recognize as a separate self. But consciousness also makes connection impossible, because you can never fully bridge the gap between your experience and someone else's. You're trapped inside your own skull, perceiving the world through your own unrepeatable sensory apparatus, constructing reality from your own unique history of experiences. Other people are doing the same thing, but their realities and yours only overlap. They never merge. You look at the person nearest you, someone you've known since birth, and feel the weight of this impossibility. Their eyes reflect the firelight. Their breathing synchronizes with yours in that automatic way that bodies in proximity will sync. You could reach out and touch them, feel their warmth, smell their familiar scent. But you can't know what they're thinking. You can't access their interior experience. You can't even be certain that their experience of the fire's warmth resembles yours, that the word warm would mean the same thing if you both had words to use. The fire crackles. Someone shifts. The sounds of the night continue their ancient patterns outside the circle of light, and you sit with this new feeling, this strange ache of being separate, wondering if everyone feels this way and just doesn't show it, or if you're uniquely broken, uniquely isolated by your capacity to notice your own isolation. Here's a quirky tidbit that might make you feel better or worse. Humans are so distressed by loneliness that it activates the same neural circuits as physical pain. Your brain literally can't tell the difference between social rejection and a broken bone when it comes to allocating suffering. This suggests that connection isn't a luxury. It's as essential to survival as avoiding injury, as fundamental to human functioning as food or shelter. You need other people, not just practically, but neurologically. Your brain expects connection the way it expects oxygen, and when it doesn't get enough, alarms start going off. But the alarms don't tell you how to fix the problem. That's the cruel trick of loneliness. It creates an urgent need for connection while simultaneously making connection harder. When you're lonely, you often withdraw, not because you want to be alone, but because the pain of failed connection seems worse than the pain of no connection at all. Better to sit at the edge of the group and watch than to reach out and discover that the gap is unbridgeable. You try anyway. You press closer to the person next to you, feel their body heat mingle with yours, hope that the physical closeness might somehow translate into emotional closeness. It helps a little. Touch is old magic, predating consciousness entirely, and the nervous system responds to it even when the mind remains skeptical. But the ache doesn't fully dissolve. The separateness persists beneath the touching, irreducible, maybe permanent. Maybe this is just what being human means now. Maybe consciousness comes with this loneliness built in, a tax on self-awareness, the price of knowing that you exist. Other animals seem to move through the world without this burden. They have social needs, certainly. They seek proximity and show distress when isolated. But they don't seem to carry this particular flavour of existential separateness. They don't know that they're alone in the universe of their own experience. But you know? And the knowing changes everything. The night deepens, the fire burns lower, your clan members drift towards sleep, their breathing slowing into familiar rhythms, and you lie awake, not from fear or grief or desire, but from this new thing, this awareness of the gap between you and everyone else, this loneliness that presence can't cure. Tomorrow you'll wake up and participate in the life of the group, doing the things that need to be done, playing your part in the ancient drama of survival. You'll connect with others in all the ways that bodies and behaviours can connect. But you'll carry this feeling with you, this secret separateness, this knowledge that no matter how close you get, you're still fundamentally alone. Welcome to the human condition. Try to get some sleep anyway. You find the shell on a beach you've never visited before, half buried in sand that still holds the warmth of the afternoon sun. Your clan has travelled farther than usual, following water sources that have begun to dry up in their regular territories, and this strange new landscape offers both threats and opportunities. The ocean sprawls before you, incomprehensibly vast, moving in ways that rocks and trees never do. But what captures your attention isn't the endless water. It's this small spiral thing at your feet, abandoned by some creature you'll never meet, left behind like a question waiting for someone to ask it. You pick it up without thinking, which is precisely the point. There's nothing useful about this shell. It's not food, not a tool, not a danger requiring investigation. By every metric that has governed behaviour for millions of years of evolution, the shell should be invisible to you beneath notice. Just another piece of environmental noise to filter out. But something in your developing brain responds to the spiral pattern, the smooth curve, the way it fits perfectly in your palm. You want to understand it, and the wanting has nothing to do with survival. This is curiosity for its own sake, and it's about to change everything. Historians still argue about when pure curiosity, exploration without immediate practical purpose, emerged as a significant driver of human behaviour. Some point to tool development, suggesting that the ability to see potential in objects required a kind of curious imagination. Others emphasise the role of play, which serves developmental functions but also seems to reflect a genuine pleasure in exploration that goes beyond preparation for adulthood. But whatever its timeline, you're experiencing it now, turning the shell over in your hands, tracing its ridges with your finger, wondering what made it, how it came to be this shape, why it feels so satisfying to examine. Here's the thing about curiosity. It's expensive. Attention is a limited resource, and every moment you spend investigating a useless shell is a moment you're not scanning for predators, searching for food, or monitoring social dynamics in your clan. Evolution generally doesn't tolerate expensive behaviours unless they pay off somehow, which means curiosity must have benefits that outweigh its costs. Maybe curious individuals discover new food sources, new territories, new techniques that less curious individuals miss. Maybe curiosity is what pushes species into new ecological niches, what drives adaptation and innovation when circumstances change. But those explanations, true as they might be, don't capture what you're feeling right now. You're not thinking about evolutionary advantages. You're not even thinking about what the shell might be used for. You're just interested, in a pure and purposeless way, caught up in the pleasure of attending to something that rewards attention with beauty. The shell has a pattern, the spiral tightening toward its centre in a mathematical progression you won't have words to describe for 100,000 years. The Fibonacci sequence is built into it, the same ratios that will appear in sunflower seeds and galaxy arms and Renaissance paintings. You don't know any of this. You just know that looking at the pattern feels good, that your eyes want to follow it, that something in the structure of reality has expressed itself in this small abandoned object, and you can perceive it even if you can't understand it. Here's a quirky tidbit that might delight you. Humans are not the only species that seems to appreciate aesthetic patterns. Bowerbirds decorate their structures with objects arranged by colour. Some primates spend long periods examining flowers and leaves with no apparent practical purpose. Beauty, or something like it, may be much older than we are, a sensitivity to pattern and form that we inherited and amplified rather than invented. Your clan members have spread out along the beach, investigating in their own ways. Some focus on the water, watching for fish or other food sources. Others examine the sand, the rocks, the unfamiliar plants growing at the edge of the shore. But you remain fixed on your shell, turning it over, holding it up to the light, running your finger along its spiral again and again. The sun begins to set, painting the sky in colours that demand attention of their own. You should be thinking about shelter, about where to make camp in this unfamiliar place, about the practical concerns that will determine whether your clan survives the night. But you can't stop looking at the shell, can't stop wondering at it, can't stop feeling the strange pleasure of pure curiosity satisfied. You're going to keep this shell. The decision forms without deliberation. Of course, you're keeping it. How could you not keep it? It serves no purpose. It contributes nothing to your survival. But it means something to you, even if you can't articulate what, and meaning is becoming a category that matters independently of utility. This is the beginning of art, of science, of religion. All the human endeavours that ask questions without expecting useful answers, that attend to the world beyond the immediate demands of staying alive. The shell in your hand will be lost eventually, along with everything else from your lifetime. But the capacity it represents, the ability to find wonder in the purposeless, will persist and grow until your descendants build telescopes to examine spiral galaxies that echo the same pattern, asking the same questions about structure and beauty that you're asking now. The ocean roars its incomprehensible roar. The stars begin to emerge. Your clan settles into the rhythms of an evening in a strange place, alert but adapting, handling novelty the way humans have always handled novelty, with a mixture of caution and curiosity that will carry the species through ice ages and across continents. And you sit apart, holding your shell, feeling the spiral against your skin, wondering at a world that contains such things. You trip. It's not a dramatic fall, just a stumble over a route you didn't see, a moment of graceless flailing before you catch yourself, arms windmilling for balance that comes barely in time. The physical event is trivial. You're not injured. The route didn't care. But when you look up, several clan members are watching you, and something unprecedented happens in your chest and face. Heat floods your cheeks. Your eyes want to look anywhere but at the observers. Your shoulders curl inward, trying to make yourself smaller. Inside your skull, a voice you didn't know existed is replaying the stumble on loop, adding commentary that's surprisingly cruel. They all saw, you looked foolish. You are foolish. You're different from them, and now they know it. This is shame, and it's inventing self-consciousness in real time. Fear was about external threats, predators, falls, hunger. Shame is about internal evaluation, about seeing yourself through others' eyes and not liking what you see. It requires a sophisticated cognitive apparatus. You have to model other minds. What are they thinking? Simulate their perspective. What did they see? And evaluate yourself against some standard. Was that normal? Am I normal? All of this happens in a fraction of a second, without any conscious decision to engage in such complex social computation. Historians still argue about whether shame is universal, whether all human cultures experience it in the same way, or whether different social structures produce different varieties of self-conscious emotion. But most evidence suggests that something like shame exists everywhere humans do, which implies it's deep in our evolutionary heritage, part of the basic cognitive toolkit that makes social living possible. Here's why shame might have evolved. Social species depend on cooperation, and cooperation requires trust. If you can't predict someone's behaviour, you can't rely on them. Shame functions as a self-enforcement mechanism. It punishes you internally for violating social norms, making it less likely you'll do so again. The painful experience of being seen as foolish or incompetent motivates you to align your behaviour with group expectations, which makes you a more reliable cooperation partner. But knowing why shame exists doesn't make it feel any less terrible. You straighten up, trying to act as if nothing happened, but the heat in your face won't dissipate and the internal commentary won't stop. The observers have already looked away. The stumble was barely interesting, certainly not memorable, but you feel like it's been recorded permanently. Like everyone who saw will now think of you as the person who trips over roots, who can't navigate the world without embarrassing themselves. This is the paranoid distortion that shame creates. You assume others are paying much more attention to you than they actually are. Your clan members have their own concerns, their own moments of awkwardness to worry about. They've probably already forgotten your stumble, but shame insists on its own importance, inflating the significance of minor failures until they feel like identity-defining events. Here's a quirky tidbit that researchers find fascinating. The physical experience of shame, the blushing, the gaze aversion, the hunched posture, is remarkably similar across cultures, suggesting it's controlled by ancient neural circuits that predate cultural diversity. Even the word for shame in many unrelated languages connects to heat, redness, visibility. Something about being seen doing wrong activates universal physiological responses that we share with our earliest ancestors. The afternoon continues, but you can't quite shake the residue of the experience. You're more careful now, watching where you step, holding yourself more rigidly, trying to minimize opportunities for further embarrassment. This is shame doing its work, modifying your behavior, making you more cautious, teaching you through discomfort. But it feels less like education and more like punishment, a harsh inner critic that never quite shuts up. You think about the stumble again and notice something strange. The memory has already changed. In your recollection, the fall is more dramatic, the observer's reactions more pronounced, your recovery more awkward. Shame doesn't just interpret reality, it edits it, creating a narrative of humiliation that may have little connection to what actually happened. You're constructing a story about yourself, and it's not a flattering one. This will be a recurring feature of human consciousness. The stories we tell about ourselves, often written by shame, often more damning than the facts warrant. You'll carry this tendency forward, passing it to descendants who will develop anxiety disorders and imposter syndrome, and the persistent sense that everyone is judging them constantly. The capacity for self-consciousness, so essential for social coordination, comes with this shadow, the possibility of self-condemnation, of turning the evaluative gaze inward and finding yourself wanting. But here's the other side of the coin, the thing that shame's harsh voice doesn't mention. The clan members who saw you stumble. They probably felt a flicker of relief. Relief that it wasn't them, yes, but also something warmer. Recognition that mistakes are universal, that everyone trips sometimes, that being human means being imperfect in front of other imperfect beings. Vulnerability connects, even when shame insists it isolates. Your stumble, far from marking you as different, actually demonstrated your membership in the fellowship of the fallible. Every person in that clan has had their own moment of gracelessness, their own private replay of minor failures. They recognize themselves in you, even if shame makes that recognition feel impossible. You won't understand this for a long time. For now, you just feel the heat slowly fading from your cheeks, the internal commentary gradually quieting, the world returning to its ordinary rhythms. The root is still there, waiting for the next person to miss it. The observers have moved on to other concerns, and you're left with a new emotional category to navigate, this uncomfortable awareness of how you appear to others, this self-consciousness that never quite goes away. Welcome to the examined life. It's going to be exhausting. The touch happens without thinking, which is what makes it significant. You reach out and place your hand on another person's arm, not to get their attention, not to push them away from danger, not for warmth or mating or any of the practical purposes that have justified physical contact throughout evolutionary history. You touch them because you feel a pull toward connection, because their presence pleases you in a way that demands expression, because affection has become a thing that exists separately from its functions. The person looks at you, surprised but not displeased. Their arm is warm under your palm. The contact creates a small bubble of intimacy in the middle of the busy camp, a private moment amid public activity. Neither of you knows what to do next. This is new territory, touch without transaction, but neither of you pulls away either. This is tenderness, and it's quietly revolutionary. Physical contact between humans has always served purposes. Grooming removes parasites while reinforcing social bonds. Nursing provides nutrition while establishing attachment. Mating produces offspring while distributing genetic diversity. Even the huddling for warmth that your clan practices nightly is fundamentally practical, bodies sharing heat to survive cold nights. But what's happening right now between you and this other person doesn't fit any of those categories. It's touch for the sake of touch, connection for the sake of connection. Historians still argue about when affection became separable from function. When humans started touching each other simply because touching felt emotionally valuable rather than physically necessary. Some suggest it emerged alongside pair bonding, as early humans developed longer-term partnerships that required maintenance beyond mating. Others point to extended childhood, arguing that the prolonged dependency of human infants created space for non-utilitarian nurturing behaviours that generalised to adult relationships. But whatever its origins, you're feeling it now. A warmth that has nothing to do with temperature, a satisfaction that has nothing to do with meeting needs. The person under your hand matters to you, not because of what they provide, not because of their role in the group, but because of something ineffable and irreducible. They exist, and that existence brings you pleasure. Here's a quirky tidbit that researchers find touching, pun intended. Gentle physical contact releases oxytocin, the same hormone involved in labour, breastfeeding, and pair bonding. Your nervous system literally can't distinguish between functional touch and affectionate touch when it comes to the chemical cascade that follows. The body responds to connection with connection-enhancing hormones regardless of conscious intention, creating a feedback loop that rewards tenderness with more tenderness. The moment stretches. Neither of you speaks, you don't have sophisticated language yet anyway, but something communicates. The pressure of your hand, the angle of their posture, the subtle changes in breathing that bodies share when they're oriented toward each other. You're developing intimacy, that strange state where two separate people begin to feel like a unit without actually merging. This will become love eventually, or at least one of love's many ingredients. But right now it's simpler than love, more basic. Just the pleasure of touching someone who wants to be touched by you. The comfort of physical presence that's been chosen rather than required. You think about all the other times you've touched this person. Practical touches, functional touches, the incidental contact of bodies sharing space. Those touches didn't feel like this. Those touches were transparent, noticed only when something went wrong. But this touch is opaque, demanding attention, creating meaning through its very purposelessness. The camp continues its activities around you. Someone is preparing food, someone else is crafting a tool. The children play in their rough way, learning through physicality what they'll need to survive. All of it is practical, directed, functional, and here you are, palm on arm, doing nothing useful at all, participating in an experiment that will eventually produce holding hands, hugging, cuddling on couches, all the small physical rituals that humans will use to signal affection across centuries. Here's something that might surprise you. Humans need touch to develop normally. Infants who receive adequate nutrition but insufficient physical contact fail to thrive, sometimes dying despite no medical explanation. Touch isn't a luxury. It's a developmental requirement, baked so deep into human biology that its absence can be lethal. What you're doing right now, this purposeless tenderness, is actually expressing something fundamental about what it means to be human. We are creatures who need to be touched, and who need to touch, beyond any practical justification. Eventually, the moment ends. Your hand falls away, the private bubble dissolves, regular life reasserts its demands. But something has changed. Something has been established. This person and you have shared a connection that went beyond utility, and that sharing creates a kind of promise. You'll touch again, you'll seek each other out, the affection will grow, finding new expressions, creating a relationship category that doesn't quite fit any of the existing slots in your social structure. Tenderness is inconvenient in a survival-focused world. It creates attachments that can become vulnerabilities, connections that hurt when broken. Your ancestors who kept things purely practical, purely functional, might have been better equipped to handle loss. But they also missed something essential. This warmth, this pleasure in presence, this quiet joy of touching someone simply because you can. The sun continues its arc, the camp continues its work, and you carry with you the memory of pressure and warmth, the beginning of a capacity that will produce poetry and heartbreak in roughly equal measure, worth it probably. But you'll have moments when you're not so sure. The confrontation starts over nothing, a piece of food maybe, or a sleeping spot, some trivial resource dispute that could have been resolved with simple gestures of deference. But something in you refuses to defer. Something rises instead, hot and electric, flooding your muscles with energy and narrowing your vision to a single point of focus. The person in front of you, the person who wants what you want, the person who needs to back down. They don't back down. The anger explodes through you like fire, consuming everything else. Your fear, your reason, your awareness of consequences. Your body moves without consultation, advancing, posturing, making itself larger and more threatening. Sounds come from your throat that you don't recognize, low and aggressive and designed to intimidate. Your heart hammers, your fists clench. Everything in your being is oriented toward one purpose, making this other person yield. This is rage, and it's terrifying in its purity. You've experienced anger before, of course. The quick flare of irritation when things don't go as expected. The defensive spike when threats appear. That anger served clear purposes, protecting resources, establishing boundaries, motivating action. But this feels different. This anger has detached from its trigger, grown larger than the situation warrants, become an end in itself rather than a means. You're not angry because you need the food. You're angry because you're angry, because the emotion has its own momentum now. Historians still argue about the relationship between emotion and reason in early humans, whether our ancestors were ruled by passions that later cognitive development learned to modulate, or whether emotional intensity and rational control evolved together in an escalating arms race. But whatever the historical truth, you're learning right now that anger can slip its leash, can become autonomous, can run the show while your more considered self watches helplessly from the sidelines. The other person meets your aggression with their own. They don't want to fight any more than you do. Nobody actually wants to fight, not when the costs of physical conflict are so high, but they can't back down either, not with the whole clan watching, not without losing status that might never be recovered. You're locked into an escalation spiral, each threat calling forth a counter-threat, each display demanding a more intense display in response. Here's a quirky tidbit that might amuse you once the adrenaline clears. Humans are actually remarkably good at avoiding the fights they seem to be seeking. All this posturing, all this noise and threat display, it's almost always theatre, a way of establishing dominance without actual violence. Studies of human conflict across cultures show that most confrontations end in backing down, not bloodshed. The rage you're feeling, overwhelming as it seems, is designed to be convincing precisely so that it doesn't have to become real. But right now it feels very real. Your muscles are trembling with readiness. Your vision has tunneled. The world has shrunk to this confrontation, this moment, this person who needs to be defeated. You've lost access to everything else. The rest of your clan, the broader context, the future consequences of whatever happens next. Anger has compressed your existence to a single burning point. And then somehow, the moment breaks. Maybe someone intervenes. Maybe the other person looks away first, a microscopic concession that your rage interprets as victory. Maybe something in your own brain finally reasserts control, reminding you of costs and consequences. However it happens, the escalation stops. The tension doesn't disappear, but it begins to drain, leaving behind shaky exhaustion and the slowly returning awareness of everything the anger had pushed aside. You stand there, breathing hard, trying to understand what just happened. The food or sleeping spot or whatever triggered this seems absurdly trivial now, nothing that could possibly justify the intensity of what you felt. But you felt it anyway. The capacity for that kind of overwhelming rage is inside you, ready to activate under the right conditions, not fully under your control. This is perhaps the most frightening thing about anger. It reveals that you are not fully in charge of yourself. There are circuits in your brain, forged by evolutionary pressures you can't override, that can take over when triggered. You're not just a unified self making rational decisions. You're a coalition of impulses, a parliament of competing drives, and anger is a faction that can stage coups when it gets enough votes. The clan settles back into its routines, the confrontation already becoming history, another data point in the complex social dynamics that determine everyone's relative status. The other person avoids your gaze, you avoid theirs. The relationship has changed, damaged by the conflict, and you don't know if it will ever fully recover. But you've also learned something about yourself, something uncomfortable and important. You're capable of losing control. You're capable of being consumed by an emotion that serves no rational purpose. You're capable of harming others not because you need to, not because it benefits you, but simply because the anger demanded expression, and you couldn't refuse. This knowledge will haunt your species. The capacity for rage that exceeds its causes will produce wars, atrocities, the destruction of relationships and communities, and sometimes entire civilizations. But it will also produce boundaries, justice, the righteous anger that responds to genuine wrong with genuine force. Anger isn't simply good or bad, it's powerful, and power always cuts both ways. The fire burns low, the camp grows quiet, and somewhere in the darkness, you sit with the residue of rage, trying to understand the creature you're becoming. You watch them from across the fire, the person who stumbled yesterday, the one everyone laughed at, the one who became briefly notorious for their graceless encounter with that root. But tonight they're not being laughed at. Tonight they're being celebrated, praised for a successful hunt, receiving attention and admiration from clan members who barely acknowledged them before. And something sour twists in your stomach, something that has nothing to do with hunger. You want what they're getting, not the meat from the hunt, there's plenty for everyone, but the attention, the status, the warm glow of approval. You want the clan's eyes on you the way they're on this person right now. And the wanting feels poisonous, shameful, like something you should be able to control but can't. This is jealousy, and it's going to cause you a lot of problems. Here's the thing that makes jealousy especially insidious. It's almost always about comparison rather than actual deprivation. You have enough to eat. You have your place in the group. Nothing has been taken from you by this person's success. And yet their gain feels like your loss. Their elevation feels like your diminishment, as if status and attention exist in fixed quantities, and every bit they receive is a bit you've been denied. Historians still argue about whether jealousy is a universal human emotion or a product of particular social structures, specifically structures that create competition for scarce resources like mates or social rank. But most evidence suggests that something like jealousy exists across all known cultures, appearing early in childhood development and persisting throughout life. We seem to be built to compare ourselves to others, and comparison often breeds resentment. The celebrated person is basking now, accepting congratulations, telling the story of the hunt with gestures that grow more dramatic with each retelling. They're performing competence, and the performance is working. Others cluster around them, wanting proximity to success, hoping that admiration flows in all directions, and you sit apart nursing your sour feeling, knowing that you should be happy for them. They did something good, the clan benefits, and completely unable to manufacture that happiness. Here's a quirky tidbit that researchers find revealing. Jealousy activates brain regions associated with pain, specifically the anterior cingulate cortex, which also lights up during social rejection and physical injury. Your brain is processing this person's success as if you've been hurt, as if their status gain has caused you damage. The emotion isn't metaphorical, it's a genuine neural event, as real as any physical sensation. You try to reason with yourself, using whatever proto-rational capacities you've developed. The clan member's success doesn't diminish your abilities. Their attention doesn't reduce your worth. You could celebrate with them, join the admiring circle, participate in the joy rather than sulking at its edges. But the jealousy doesn't respond to reason. It sits in your gut like a stone, heavy and indigestible, colouring your perception of someone who's done nothing wrong except succeed in your presence. The worst part is that you don't even dislike this person. Under other circumstances, you'd probably enjoy their company, value their contribution to the group, maybe even share genuine affection. But jealousy transforms relationship. It makes allies feel like competitors, friends feel like threats. The emotion creates its own reality, one where every social interaction is zero-sum, and someone else's winning means you're losing. You think about your own achievements, trying to restore some equilibrium. You've contributed to the clan. You have your own skills, your own moments of recognition. But jealousy isn't interested in your achievements. It's only interested in the gap between what you have and what others have. You could be the most successful person in the group and still feel jealous of someone who surpasses you in one small domain. The emotion is insatiable, always finding new comparisons, new ways to come up short. The fire crackles, the celebration continues. Gradually the attention disperses as novelty fades and regular social patterns reassert themselves. The celebrated person returns to ordinary status, just another member of the clan, their moment of glory already becoming memory. And still the jealousy lingers in you, even though its object has disappeared, even though there's nothing left to envy. This persistence is perhaps jealousy's cruelest feature. It doesn't respond to changed circumstances the way fear or hunger do. It creates narratives, builds stories about unfairness and deprivation that outlast the situations that triggered them. You might carry this feeling for days, turning it over, elaborating it, making it into a grievance that shapes how you interact with the celebrated person, long after their celebration has ended. But here's the thing that might eventually save you. Jealousy, unlike some emotions, seems to know that it's bad. There's a meta-awareness built in, a recognition that this feeling is shameful, that it reveals something unflattering about its host. You don't want to be jealous. The jealousy itself isn't satisfying the way even anger can be satisfying in its intensity. This is a purely painful emotion, and that pain creates motivation to address it. Not by eliminating the competition, but by examining the comparison itself. What if their success isn't your failure? What if attention isn't zero-sum? What if you could choose to celebrate them genuinely, training your emotional responses through repeated practice until the jealousy fades? You're not there yet, not even close, but the possibility exists, and that's something. The sky unfolds above you like nothing you've ever seen before, and something in your chest opens in response. A kind of vertigo that has nothing to do with physical imbalance, a sense of yourself shrinking and expanding at the same time. You've looked at stars before, everyone looks at stars, but tonight something shifts, and looking becomes seeing, and seeing becomes something else entirely. You're experiencing awe, and it's going to change your relationship with existence. The stars number beyond counting. You try anyway, lose track almost immediately, start again, lose track again. They form patterns you've never noticed, connect into shapes that seem meaningful, even though you can't say why. The longer you look, the more appear, your eyes adjusting to darkness and revealing depth you didn't know the sky contained. And with each new revelation, that strange feeling in your chest intensifies, somewhere between terror and wonder, too big to be comfortable, too important to look away from. Here's what's happening in your brain, though you won't have the concepts to understand it for millennia. Your mind is encountering something that exceeds its modelling capacity. Normally, experience fits into categories. This is food, this is danger, this is a clan member. But the night sky refuses categories. It's too vast, too complex, too fundamentally different from anything your survival-focused cognition was designed to process. And the result is awe, a state where normal mental processing suspends and something else takes over. Historians still argue about whether awe is adaptive, whether there's an evolutionary advantage to states that make you feel small, that humble you before vastness you can't comprehend. Some suggest awe promotes cooperation by reminding individuals of their insignificance, dampening ego in ways that benefit the group. Others think awe is a byproduct, an unintended consequence of pattern recognition systems encountering patterns too large to recognize. But whatever its origins, you're feeling it now, and it's unlike anything else in your growing emotional repertoire. The night is quiet around you. Your clan members sleep, oblivious to your vigil. You should be sleeping too. Tomorrow will demand energy, effort, all the practical requirements of staying alive. But you can't look away from the sky, can't break the spell of this strange new feeling. The stars feel important in a way that food and shelter and social status don't. They feel like they're trying to tell you something, if only you knew how to listen. Here's a quirky tidbit that might deepen your awe. Some of the light reaching your eyes tonight left its source before your species existed. You're literally looking into the past, watching photons that were emitted when the planet below you was still lifeless. The stars aren't just far away in space, they're far away in time, and your visual system is receiving messages from eras you'll never visit. You don't know any of this, of course. You don't have the concepts of light years or cosmic history, or the physics of stellar evolution. But something in you responds to the implications anyway, a felt sense of depth and distance and time that exceeds your individual existence by margins too large to comprehend. The feeling evolves as you continue watching. At first, it was mostly wonder, amazement at the sheer quantity and beauty of what you're seeing. But gradually something darker creeps in, a terror that shares space with the wonder without contradicting it. The universe is big, and you are small, and that disproportion means something terrible that you can't quite articulate. This is the sublime, beauty mixed with fear, admiration mixed with annihilation, anxiety, the experience of encountering something so much greater than yourself that your self-concept buckles under the strain. The sublime will inspire religions, philosophies, poetry, all the ways humans try to metabolize their own insignificance. For now, it just is. A raw experience without interpretation, a feeling that has no name and needs none. You think about the person you were before tonight. That person had concerns, desires, fears, all real, all important. But those concerns existed on a certain scale, a human scale, bounded by the horizons of daily life and social relationships. Looking at the sky has broken those boundaries, revealed that the scale you've been operating on is vanishingly small compared to what actually exists. This could be crushing. It could make everything feel pointless, all your strivings revealed as cosmic jokes. And there will be humans who respond to awe this way, who find in the vastness of the universe a reason for despair. But there's another response, equally available, equally valid. The sense that your existence, however small, participates in something unimaginably larger. The stars don't diminish you, they include you. You're part of whatever this is, this vast, incomprehensible something that produces light and space, and the eyes to see them. The night deepens, the stars wheel overhead in their ancient dance, and you sit with your awe, letting it be whatever it needs to be, not trying to resolve it or explain it away. Some experiences are meant to remain unmetabolized, meant to persist as open questions, meant to humble and expand in equal measure. Tomorrow you'll return to ordinary life, to the practical concerns that keep you alive. But you'll carry this night with you, this memory of smallness and vastness intertwined. The sky will never look quite the same again. And maybe that's the point. Maybe awe exists to remind you that ordinary life, for all its importance, isn't the whole story. Maybe those stars are there to say, remember what you're part of. Winter closes in like a fist, and with it comes a desperation you've never felt before. The food sources that sustained your clan through easier seasons have vanished. Fruit trees bare, animals scarce, the landscape stripped of its usual generosity. You've already experienced hunger, that familiar companion of prehistoric life. But this is different. This is hunger without visible end, a deprivation that stretches toward a horizon you can't see. And yet, something strange is happening in your mind. Despite the emptiness in your belly and the fear in your heart, a tiny voice keeps insisting that things will get better. The cold will end. The food will return. You will survive this somehow through means you can't yet imagine. This voice has no evidence to support its claims. It speaks against all reasonable assessment of the situation. But it speaks anyway, persistent and irrational, offering you something unprecedented. This is hope, and it might be the most audacious emotion humans ever developed. Think about what hope requires. The ability to imagine a future different from the present, the belief that change is possible, the willingness to act as if things will improve despite no guarantee that they will. From a strictly evolutionary standpoint, hope is puzzling. Pessimism seems more adaptive. If you expect the worst, you prepare for it, and when it comes, you're ready. Optimism risks disappointment, risks wasted effort, risks the devastating crash when hope proves unfounded. But hope persists anyway, stubbornly asserting itself in circumstances that should extinguish it. Historians still argue about whether hope emerged as an adaptation for enduring hardship, or as a byproduct of the same cognitive machinery that allows planning and imagination. Either way, you're feeling it now. This irrational warmth in your chest, this refusal to accept that the present difficulty is permanent. Here's a quirky tidbit that might comfort you. People who experience hope during crises often fare better than those who don't, even controlling for their actual circumstances. Hope isn't just a feeling. It's a functional state that mobilizes resources, maintains motivation, and prevents the behavioral shutdown that despair produces. Your ancestors who hoped, even unreasonably, probably survived more winters than those who gave up when the odds turned against them. The days blur together, each one a negotiation with scarcity. Your clan ranges farther than usual, looking for anything edible, anything that might sustain life until conditions improve. You find bark you've never eaten before, roots that require laborious processing, insects that taste terrible but provide calories. None of it is enough. The hunger persists, a constant background ache that shapes every thought and decision. But the hope persists too, equally constant, equally shaping. You catch yourself looking toward the horizon where the sun rises, anticipating the gradual lengthening of days that signals winter's loosening grip. You imagine the landscape transforming, greening, coming back to life the way it has every spring you can remember. The image isn't particularly vivid. You don't have the cognitive technology for detailed visualization yet, but it's there, a felt sense of possibility that counterbalances the felt sense of desperation. Your clan members respond to hardship differently. Some seem broken by it, moving through the days mechanically, conserving energy for a survival they no longer believe in. Others rage against circumstance, burning energy in frustration and despair. But a few like you seem to carry this strange flame of expectation, this belief that tomorrow might be better than today. And those few, not coincidentally, tend to be the ones who keep looking, keep trying, keep finding the unexpected resources that help the whole group survive. Hope is contagious, you notice. When you approach the day with even minimal optimism, others seem to catch it, their own efforts revitalized by your example. The group dynamics shift subtly around whoever carries hope, gravitating toward that warmth the way bodies gravitate toward fire. Leadership, you're discovering, isn't just about strength or dominance. It's about maintaining the emotional state that allows effort to continue. Here's the thing about hope that nobody warns you about. It hurts when it's wrong. False hope, believing improvement is coming when it isn't, can be worse than no hope at all. The crash from optimism to reality is brutal, and there will be winters your species doesn't survive. Individuals who hoped until the very end and died disappointed anyway. Hope isn't a guarantee. It's a gamble, a bet that the future will justify the present suffering. But you make the bet anyway. What's the alternative? Despair might be more accurate to your circumstances, but accuracy isn't everything. The person who hopes wrongly still experiences the hope, still has those moments of warmth and possibility before reality intrudes. And the person who hopes rightly, who endures the hardship and lives to see the improvement, has both the survival and the emotional sustenance that hope provided along the way. The winter isn't over. You don't know when it will end or whether you'll survive it. Your belly is empty, your body is weakening, and the cold shows no signs of relenting. By any reasonable assessment, despair would be the appropriate response. But you look toward the horizon anyway. You imagine spring. You believe against evidence that things will get better. This might be foolish. It might be the most rational thing you've ever done. The action happens before you can stop it. Your arm swings, your hand connects, and the person in front of you, smaller than you, weaker than you, someone who posed no real threat, stumbles backward with a look of shock that mirrors your own internal state. You didn't mean to hit them, or you did mean to, but you didn't mean to. The anger rose, the arm swung, and now there's a consequence standing before you, a consequence written in their stunned expression, and the redness blooming on their face. You feel terrible, and you don't know what to do with the feeling. This is guilt, the emotion that follows wrongdoing like a shadow, and it's going to become one of your most frequent companions in this new life of moral awareness. Unlike shame, which we visited earlier, guilt isn't about how you appear to others, it's about what you actually did. You could be completely alone, unobserved by any other consciousness, and guilt would still find you. It's internal prosecution, conscience conducting its trial, and the verdict has already come in. Guilty. Here's the strange mechanism at work. Your brain contains something like a model of social rules, accumulated through observation and experience, and guilt is what happens when your behaviour violates that model. You hit someone who didn't deserve to be hit. The model says this is wrong. The violation generates distress. Simple enough, except that now you have to live with that distress, find some way to integrate it, because unlike external wounds, guilt doesn't heal on its own. Historians still argue about whether guilt is innate or learned, whether we're born with the capacity for moral self-evaluation or develop it through socialization. The evidence suggests something in between. We're born with the neural hardware for guilt. The circuits that detect violations, generate distress, motivate repair, but the specific content of what triggers guilt varies enormously across cultures and time periods. What you feel guilty about might be different from what your descendants feel guilty about, but the feeling itself seems to be universal. The person you hit hasn't moved. They're watching you, probably trying to figure out what happens next, whether this was a single lapse or the beginning of escalation. Your clan members, who witnessed the whole thing, have frozen into that attentive stillness that signals social drama in progress. Everyone is waiting to see what you'll do with what you've done. Here's a quirky tidbit that researchers find fascinating. Guilt motivates repair behaviours, apologies, compensation, changed behaviour, more reliably than any external punishment. The internal distress is so uncomfortable that people will go to considerable lengths to resolve it, often doing more to make amends than would have been required by any outside authority. Guilt is, in this sense, surprisingly efficient. Evolution discovered that making wrongdoing feel terrible is cheaper than enforcing consequences externally. But efficiency doesn't make the feeling any less painful. You stand there, the weight of your action pressing down, not knowing how to begin addressing what you've done. An apology would help. The verbal acknowledgement of wrongdoing that partially discharges guilt. But you don't have sophisticated language yet. All you have are sounds, gestures, the body language of submission that signals regret across species boundaries. You try anyway. You lower your posture, making yourself smaller than the person you hurt. You make sounds that even to your own ears seem plaintive, apologetic. You approach them slowly, non-threateningly, and when you're close enough, you reach out. Not to hit this time, but to touch gently, reparatively. The gesture is awkward. You're inventing reconciliation in real time, without any template to follow. The person hesitates, then accepts. Not fully. Trust doesn't rebuild that quickly, but enough. They don't flinch away from your touch. They meet your eyes briefly before looking aside. The frozen tableau of the watching clan relaxes slightly. tension easing now that the drama has a resolution, even an imperfect one. But the guilt doesn't fully resolve. This is guilt's lingering quality. Even when you've done what you can to make amends, the memory of the wrong persists. Days from now, weeks, you'll remember this moment, your arms swinging, their face, and feel the ache return, freshened by recollection. Guilt doesn't just punish the action, it punishes the memory of the action, creating ongoing cost for past behaviour. This persistence is what makes guilt effective. If the feeling disappeared the moment amends were made, you might not learn. But because guilt revisits you, because the memory continues to sting, you're more likely to develop the inhibitions that prevent repetition. Next time anger rises and your arm wants to swing, there will be a countervailing voice, a reminder of how this felt, an additional weight on the side of restraint. You've discovered conscience, the internal monitor that observes your behaviour and judges it against standards you didn't consciously choose. It's going to be demanding, this new capacity. It's going to make you uncomfortable in ways your ancestors never experienced, adding moral dimensions to choices that used to be purely practical. But it's also going to make you better, more careful, more considerate, more trustworthy in the eyes of others who can see that you hold yourself accountable. The guilt you're feeling right now is the down payment on future cooperation, the demonstration that you can be relied upon to care about the consequences of your actions. Small comfort when the ache is fresh, but comfort nonetheless. The task was impossible. Everyone knew it was impossible. The cliff face too steep, the handhold too far, the gap between your capabilities and the requirements unbridgeable by any sensible assessment. But you tried anyway, because something in you refused to accept the impossibility, and now, impossibly, you're standing at the top, chest heaving, looking down at the clan members whose faces register something you've never seen before directed at you. Respect. Something swells in your chest, something enormous and warm, something that makes you want to expand and claim space and be seen. You did it. You actually did it. And the feeling of having done it, of having defied reasonable expectations, is unlike anything you've experienced before. This is pride, and it's going to be both gift and poison for as long as your species exists. Here's the paradox of pride. It's necessary and it's dangerous. Necessary because without pride, without the anticipation of this swelling satisfaction, you would never have attempted the impossible climb. Dangerous because pride can blind you, can make you believe you're capable of things you're not, can set you up for falls that hurt far worse than failure ever would have. Your ancestors who felt no pride at achievement probably didn't attempt much. The risk-reward calculation, without pride's sweetener, wouldn't have closed. Why gamble survival on difficult tasks when easier paths exist? But your ancestors who felt only pride, who inflated every small success into proof of universal capability, probably didn't survive long either. Pride that exceeds its evidence is arrogance, and arrogance gets people killed. Historians still argue about the social function of pride displays, whether the chest puffing, the elevated posture, the claiming of visual attention serve to establish dominance, attract mates, secure resources, or all of the above. What's clear is that pride has a public dimension. It wants to be seen. Unlike some emotions that would be just as intense in solitude, pride seems incomplete without witnesses, as if the feeling requires external validation to fully register. You notice this as you stand on the cliff top looking down at your clan members. The pride isn't just in the accomplishment, it's in being seen accomplishing, in having your capability reflected back through others' recognition. If you'd made this climb alone, with no one to witness, would it feel the same? You suspect not. Pride is social in a way that makes it dependent on audience, vulnerable to others' judgments in a way that simpler satisfactions aren't. Here's a quirky tidbit that might humble you slightly. Pride activates the same reward circuitry as addictive substances. The brain rewards social success with dopamine, creating a motivational loop that can become compulsive. People chase pride the way they chase other pleasures, sometimes at considerable cost to other values. The feeling that's flooding you right now, as good as it is, has the potential to lead you astray if you start optimizing purely for its recurrence. But for now, you let yourself enjoy it. The climb was hard. The fear was real. You remember the moment halfway up when your grip slipped and falling seemed certain, when the terror contracted your world to a single desperate heartbeat. You kept going anyway, found new handholds, created solutions on the fly, demonstrated capabilities you didn't know you had. That deserves celebration. That deserves this swelling warmth that makes everything seem possible. The descent is easier, obviously. Gravity cooperates rather than resists. Your clan members cluster around you at the bottom, touching your arms and shoulders in that gesture of acknowledgement that predates language. Someone makes sounds of appreciation. Someone else repeats the story of the climb through gestures, emphasizing the impossible parts, building the legend in real time. You let them. This is Pride's social function operating. Your achievement is becoming group property, a shared narrative that will be told around fires, that will inspire future attempts at impossible things, that will contribute to your clan's collective sense of what's achievable. Your pride isn't just for you, it's for everyone who witnessed, everyone who now believes a little more strongly in what humans can do. But there's a shadow side, a warning that whispers even amid the triumph. Pride can become identity, can make you believe that you are your achievements, that your worth depends on continued success. What happens when the next climb defeats you? When the next impossible task proves to be actually impossible? Will you be able to accept limitation without feeling diminished, to fail without feeling worthless? These are questions you can't answer yet, not standing here in the glow of success. For now, pride is purely good, purely sweet, a reward for effort that more than compensates for the risk. But the questions wait, patient as stone, ready to surface the first time you fall. Enjoy this then, you've earned it. Just remember that earning isn't the same as owning, and even the highest climb ends in coming back down. The predators have been driven off. The food stores are full. The weather has settled into a comfortable pattern that requires neither huddling for warmth nor seeking shade from brutal sun. By every metric that has governed your existence, things are good. You should be content. You should be at ease. Instead, you feel nothing. Less than nothing. A strange absence of feeling that's somehow worse than feeling bad. You're bored, and boredom is the weirdest emotion you've discovered yet. Here's the puzzle. Boredom shouldn't exist. From an evolutionary standpoint, periods of safety and abundance should be welcomed, should be savoured as rare respites from the endless struggle to survive. Your nervous system should be conserving energy, preparing for future challenges, enjoying the break from constant vigilance. Instead, it's generating this restless discomfort, this inexplicable dissatisfaction with having nothing to do. The sensation is hard to describe because it's not really about any specific lack. You're not hungry, not scared, not lonely, not any of the uncomfortable things you've learned to recognize and address. This is different, a kind of flatness, a greying of experience, where every available activity seems equally uninteresting, and time itself seems to have thickened into an obstacle. Historians still argue about when boredom emerged as a significant human experience. Some trace it to cognitive complexity, the same capacity for mental time travel that allows planning and anticipation also creates expectation, and boredom might be what happens when expectations aren't met with sufficient stimulation. Others suggest boredom is more recent, a product of leisure that most of human history didn't allow for. Your ancestors might have been too busy surviving to ever feel bored, but you're feeling it now, this strange itch that has no clear way to be scratched. You've tried the activities that usually satisfy. Eating, you're not hungry. Socializing, the interactions feel empty. Exploring, you've seen everything nearby, nothing surprises. The problem isn't the activities themselves, it's your relationship to them, some disconnect between what you're doing and what you apparently need. Here's a quirky tidbit that might explain what's happening. The human brain doesn't actually want comfort, it wants optimal challenge. Too little stimulation produces boredom, too much produces anxiety. Somewhere in between is flow, that state of absorbed engagement where time passes effortlessly, and action and awareness merge. Boredom, from this perspective, is your brain's way of saying, "This is too easy, find something harder." The insight is interesting but not immediately helpful. You can't manufacture challenge out of comfortable circumstances, can't make food scarce or invite predators just to have something to worry about. The abundance that should be blessing has become burden, and you don't know how to want what you have. You find yourself doing strange things, picking up objects and putting them down, walking in circles, starting conversations you immediately lose interest in. The restlessness won't settle, won't transform into any directed activity, just keeps churning without producing motion. You're agitated and listless at the same time, a combination that seems contradictory, but somehow coexists. Maybe this is what drives innovation, you start to think. Maybe boredom is the engine of progress, the discomfort that pushes species beyond mere survival into creativity and exploration. Your ancestors, who felt most acutely bored during periods of abundance, might have been the ones who invented new tools, discovered new territories, developed the arts and technologies that eventually built civilizations. But that thought is cold comfort in the immediate moment. Right now, you just feel flat, uninspired, disconnected from the life that's supposed to be satisfying. The fire burns, the clan goes about its business, the world continues its patterns, and you sit apart feeling nothing and everything at once, waiting for something to happen, not knowing what. Safety, it turns out, has its own problems. When you're no longer struggling to survive, you have to figure out how to live, and that's a challenge your brain doesn't have built-in solutions for. The sun moves through its arc. The shadows lengthen. Eventually something will change. A new need will arise. A new crisis will demand attention. The comfortable circumstances will shift into something more demanding. You find yourself almost hoping for it, even though hoping for trouble seems perverse. Boredom, the emotion that makes you wish for problems. What a strange thing to evolve. You find yourself standing in a place you've stood before and the standing feels different. Years have passed. How many you don't know, but enough that your body has changed, your understanding has deepened, your relationship to the world has transformed in ways you couldn't have predicted when you first stood here. The tree where you gathered fruit as a younger person is still here, still bearing, still alive. But you are no longer the person who first discovered it. And suddenly, achingly, you miss who you were. This is nostalgia. The strange, backward-facing emotion that makes the past feel more vivid than the present, that idealizes what's gone and diminishes what remains. You're remembering a time when things seemed simpler, when the world was newer, when possibilities stretched endlessly because you didn't yet know which ones would close. The memory is sweet and painful in equal measure, a bittersweet cocktail that your consciousness apparently invented to torture itself. Here's the thing about nostalgia. It's never accurate. The past you're missing is a reconstruction, edited by memory into something better than it actually was. You weren't happier then. You had fears and frustrations and the same restlessness that plagues you now. But memory has smoothed the rough edges, highlighted the good moments, created a golden age that exists only in retrospect. Historians still argue about whether nostalgia serves any adaptive function, or is simply a bug in human memory systems. Some suggest it provides comfort during difficult times, offering a sense that things have been good before and might be again. Others see it as motivation for environmental maintenance, driving people to preserve what reminded them of the past. But whatever its function, you're feeling it now, this longing for a time you can never return to. The fruit tree doesn't care about your nostalgia. It continues its life, producing and dropping, growing and weathering. The sun has moved to a different position than you remember. Or maybe you're just remembering wrong. The landscape has shifted subtly. New growth where there was none, death where there was life. Change is constant, and your memory is the only thing insisting otherwise. Here's a quirky tidbit that might deepen your melancholy. Nostalgia used to be classified as a disease. 17th century physicians diagnosed it in soldiers far from home, treating it as a serious medical condition with physical symptoms. The word itself comes from Greek roots meaning homecoming and pain, the pain of wanting to return to a home that may no longer exist. What you're feeling right now was once considered dangerous, even fatal. You try to stay in the present, to appreciate the tree as it is now rather than mourning the tree as it was. But the past keeps intruding, overlaying memory onto perception, creating a palimpsest of then and now that refuses to resolve into either. You're standing in two times at once, your younger self visible like a ghost, making everything feel strange and doubled. This is the curse of consciousness remembering itself. You can never simply be where you are, because memory insists on showing you where you were. The present is always contaminated by the past, always measured against earlier versions that never had to compete with anything. First times are special precisely because they lack comparison. Everything after is burdened by what came before, but there's another way to see this, a gentler interpretation that might ease the ache. Nostalgia proves that you've had good times worth missing. It demonstrates that your life has contained value, moments bright enough to glow in retrospect. The pain of nostalgia is the flip side of having loved and enjoyed and lived fully. If you'd never had anything worth remembering, you'd never feel this longing for what's gone. The fruit is ripe. You pick one, bite into it, taste the sweetness that's been here all along, unchanged by your changing. The flavour doesn't quite match your memory. Nothing ever matches memory. Memory's too good at its job, but it's good anyway. Good in its own right. Good in this present moment that will itself become nostalgia someday. Maybe that's the wisdom hidden in this uncomfortable emotion. Maybe nostalgia is teaching you to pay attention now, to notice and appreciate and store up the good moments that will sustain your future self during harder times. The ache for the past is a reminder to be present for the present, knowing that it too will become precious once it's gone. You stand beneath the tree as the afternoon fades, holding your fruit, feeling your feelings. The past is gone. The future hasn't arrived. This moment right now is all you actually have. It'll have to be enough. The ledge is narrow, the drop below it infinite, and the only thing keeping you from falling is the grip of a hand that isn't yours. Someone from your clan has extended themselves, is bearing your weight, is the single fragile link between you and oblivion. Your fingers dig into their wrist with desperate force. Their face, straining with effort, shows nothing but determination to not let go. And in that suspended moment, hanging between life and death, you realize something transformative. You're trusting them completely, with everything you are. This is trust, and it might be the most dangerous emotion humans ever developed. Think about what trust requires. The willingness to make yourself vulnerable, to depend on someone else's goodness when you have no power to enforce it. The person holding your wrist could open their hand. They have complete control over your survival, and you have none. You're betting your existence on their choice, and there's absolutely nothing you can do to guarantee they'll choose well. From a purely self-interested perspective, this seems insane. Why would evolution produce creatures capable of putting themselves at the mercy of others? Why would natural selection, which punishes vulnerability with death, create organisms that voluntarily make themselves vulnerable? But the answer is cooperation. Humans survive not through individual strength, but through collective action. We hunt together, defend together, care for our young together, and collective action requires trust. The belief that others will do their part, will show up when needed, will hold on to the wrist when letting go would be easier. Without trust, there's no cooperation. Without cooperation, there are no humans. Historians still argue about how trust emerged and how it's maintained in human societies. Some emphasize reputation. You trust people who've proven trustworthy, building reliable models of their character over time. Others point to kinship. You trust family more than strangers because genetic relatedness aligns your interests. Still others focus on institutions, the cultural structures that punish betrayal and reward reliability. But right now, none of those theories matter. Right now, there's just the grip, the strain, the desperate hope that this person will hold on. Here's a quirky tidbit that might comfort you. Trust activates the same neurochemistry as other forms of social bonding. The oxytocin that flows during physical affection, during breastfeeding, during moments of intimate connection, that same hormone floods your system when you trust and are trusted. Your brain literally rewards the risk of vulnerability, treats successful trust as a form of pleasure, incentivizes the leap of faith that cooperation requires. The person holding you grunts with effort, shifts their position, begins to pull. Your body moves upward, away from the edge, towards safety. The process is agonizingly slow, each inch a miracle of sustained effort, but progress is being made. They're doing it. They're actually doing it. And then you're over the edge, sprawled on solid ground, breathing in great gasps, your rescuer collapsed beside you, with the exhaustion of someone who just bench-pressed another human survival. For a long moment, neither of you moves. The enormity of what just happened hangs in the air between you. You look at them. Really look, seeing not just a clan member, but a person who chose to save you, who could have let go and didn't. Something has changed in your relationship, something irreversible. They have proven themselves trustworthy in the most dramatic way possible, and that proof will never fully fade. But here's the thing about trust that nobody mentions. Once established, it creates expectations. You now expect this person to be reliable, to come through when it matters, and they expect the same from you. Trust isn't a one-time gift. It's an ongoing contract, a promise renewed with every interaction. The relationship that just saved your life also just bound you to obligations you didn't consciously agree to. This is why trust is dangerous. Not because trusting makes you vulnerable, that part you understood, but because being trusted makes you responsible. The person who held onto your wrist will now count on you in their own moments of crisis, and you'll feel obligated to hold on, even when holding on is hard, even when letting go would be easier. Welcome to the social contract. It started here, on this ledge, with a hand extended and a choice made. Everything that comes after, friendship, society, civilization, grows from this root of trust and obligation, this willingness to be both vulnerable and responsible. The sun continues its arc. Your heart rate slowly returns to normal. Beside you, your rescuer breathes, recovers, perhaps contemplates the same enormity you're contemplating. You owe them now. That's terrifying and wonderful in roughly equal measure. The person who saved your life is the same person who told others where to find you alone, who shared information that put you in danger in the first place, who set up the very crisis they heroically resolved. You discover this slowly, through fragments of conversation, through observed glances, through the accumulating evidence that someone you trusted was playing a more complicated game than you understood. The realization doesn't come all at once. It creeps, building from suspicion to hypothesis to terrible certainty. And when it finally crystallizes, when you can no longer doubt that you've been manipulated, something inside you breaks that you're not sure can be repaired. This is betrayal, and it's going to hurt worse than anything else on this journey. Now, here's the thing about betrayal that makes it uniquely devastating. It compounds. You're not just injured by the original harm, you're injured by the violation of trust, and you're injured by your own failure to see it coming, and you're injured by the implications for your ability to trust anyone else ever again. One act of betrayal ripples outward, contaminating past and future, making you question relationships that were never actually threatened. Trust, remember, is a bet. You wager your vulnerability against someone else's goodness, hoping the odds are in your favour. Usually they are. Most people, most of the time, don't betray. But when the bet loses, the loss is catastrophic precisely because you invested so much. You didn't just have something taken, you gave it away, cooperated in your own harm, enabled the very betrayal that's now devastating you. Historians still argue about how human societies develop resilience to betrayal, what mechanisms evolve to identify, punish, and recover from trust violations. Reputation systems help, making betrayers visible so others can avoid them. Graduated trust helps, making people prove reliability in small matters before being trusted with large ones. But none of these mechanisms prevent betrayal entirely. The vulnerability that allows cooperation also allows exploitation, and no social structure has ever eliminated exploitation completely. You look at the person differently now. The face that seemed trustworthy seems sinister. The gestures that communicated care seem calculated. Memory rewrites itself, reinterpreting every interaction through the lens of betrayal, finding signs you should have noticed, clues you missed because you didn't want to see them. Here's a quirky tidbit that might validate your experience. Brain imaging studies show that betrayal activates the same regions as physical disgust. Your body is literally treating the betrayer as contaminated, something to be avoided, expelled from proximity. The nausea you might be feeling isn't metaphorical. It's your disgust system responding to social threat the same way it responds to spoiled food. But what do you do with this knowledge? Revenge seems attractive. Make them feel what you're feeling, punish the violation, restore some sense of justice. But revenge costs resources, escalates conflict, damages your own reputation as much as theirs. Walking away seems wiser, but the betrayal happened within your clan. There's no away to walk to. And forgiveness seems impossible, at least right now, with a wound so fresh that even looking at this person makes your chest tight. So you exist in the aftermath, injured and uncertain, the social world you thought you understood revealed as more dangerous than you knew. If this person could betray you, anyone could. If your judgment failed this badly, how can you trust your judgment again? The betrayal hasn't just damaged one relationship, it's damaged your entire capacity for connection, made every future trust feel like a risk you've already proven incapable of assessing. This is the true cost of betrayal, not just the harm done but the harm to come, all the connections that won't form because you've learned that connection can be weaponized. The betrayer hasn't just hurt you, they've hurt your future self and all the people that future self won't be able to fully trust. The fire burns low. Your clan settles into its nighttime patterns, unaware or indifferent to the crisis playing out in your heart. The betrayer moves among them like nothing has happened, like the world hasn't tilted on its axis. Maybe it hasn't, for anyone but you. But you sit with the knowledge, letting it sink into bones that feel suddenly very old. Trust can be broken. People can pretend. The same hand that saves you can be the hand that put you in danger in the first place. Welcome to the full complexity of human social life. It was always this complicated. You just didn't know it yet. And then there's this person who makes your chest ache in a way that has nothing to do with illness, who occupies your thoughts even when they're not present, who seems to matter more than survival itself in ways that make no evolutionary sense. You've felt attraction before, and affection, and desire, but this is different. This is all of those things combined into something greater than their sum, something that demands a word you don't have yet, something that might be the most powerful emotion your species ever stumbles into. This is love, the full catastrophic version, and you are completely unprepared. Let's be clear about what's happening. Your brain, that pattern recognition machine optimized for survival, has locked onto another person as essential. Not useful, not pleasant, not even particularly beneficial. Essential, in the sense that oxygen is essential, in the sense that food and water are essential. Your nervous system has categorized someone else's well-being as equivalent to your own, has created a feedback loop where their happiness produces your happiness and their suffering produces your suffering. This is inefficient, this is vulnerable. This is how your descendants will break each other's hearts across millennia, how they'll build monuments and destroy kingdoms, how they'll create the greatest art humanity ever produces and also the most destructive wars. Love is power, and power always cuts both ways. Historians still argue about what love actually is, whether it's a cultural construction that varies across societies or a biological universal built into human hardware. The evidence suggests both. There's something innate about pair bonding, about the neurochemical cascade that creates attachment, but its expression varies enormously depending on social context. The love you're feeling right now might look nothing like the love your distant descendants will feel, and yet both versions would be recognisable as the same fundamental phenomenon. Here's a quirky tidbit that might not comfort you at all. Love involves the same brain regions as addiction. The ventral tegmental area, which floods the system with dopamine during pleasurable experiences, activates intensely during romantic love. The person you love has become a drug, literally, a source of neurochemical reward that your brain will go to extraordinary lengths to maintain access to. You watch this person across the fire, tracking their movements, cataloguing their expressions, constructing and reconstructing a model of their inner world. They haven't noticed your attention, or maybe they have and are pretending not to, or maybe they're watching you with equal intensity and both of you are pretending not to notice. The social dance of potential love is exhausting and exhilarating, every interaction loaded with significance, every silence pregnant with possibility. What do you even want from them? Everything is the honest answer, and that's terrifying. You want their presence and their attention and their touch and their thoughts and their future and their past. You want to merge, to eliminate the separateness that makes you two distinct beings, to become something that encompasses both of you. This is the impossible desire at the heart of love, the longing to overcome the fundamental isolation of consciousness, to truly know another person and be truly known. It can't be done, of course. You'll always be separate. Even in the most intimate moments, there'll be a gap between your experience and theirs, an unbridgeable distance that love can narrow but never eliminate. And that gap is part of what makes love so powerful. You're reaching towards something you can never fully grasp, and the reaching itself becomes the relationship. The fire crackles. The night deepens. Somewhere in your chest the ache intensifies, demanding action, demanding expression, demanding something that might resolve this unbearable tension of loving from a distance. You think about approaching them, making your feelings known, risking the rejection that would be worse than death. You think about staying silent, preserving the possibility of love by never testing it against reality. Both options seem impossible. Both options seem inevitable. This is what love does to decision-making. It creates stakes so high that every choice feels momentous, every action irreversible. You don't know how this will end. Love stories have many endings, not all of them happy. But right now, in this moment, with the fire warm and the stars bright and this person breathing the same air you're breathing, the uncertainty feels almost bearable. Almost. The person across the camp is someone you should be neutral toward. No history of conflict, no competition for resources, no reason for the feeling that's been growing in your gut for days. And yet there's something in how they move, or how they look at others, or some ineffable quality you can't name that makes your skin crawl, that makes you wish they would simply cease to exist. This is hatred, the cold emotion, the one that doesn't burn like anger but freezes instead, that doesn't flare and fade but persists and hardens, that creates enemies out of strangers and sustains grudges across generations. You've experienced anger. We visited that together, remember? The hot surge that overrides reason and wants immediate action. Hatred is different. Hatred is patient. Hatred doesn't need provocation because it carries its own fuel, generating and regenerating hostility without external input. Anger wants to strike and be done. Hatred wants to destroy and keep destroying. Here's what's disturbing about hatred. It feels good. Not in the pleasurable sense, but in the sense of righteous clarity. The world simplifies when you hate someone. They become the problem, the enemy, the obstacle. All the complexity of social life, all the ambiguity of human motivation, collapses into a clean binary. You versus them. There's a perverse comfort in that simplicity, a relief in knowing exactly where you stand. Historians still argue about whether hatred is a distinct emotion or just sustained anger, whether it serves any evolutionary function or is purely pathological. Some suggest hatred evolved as a mechanism for identifying and excluding free riders, people who take from the group without contributing. Others see it as a byproduct of tribalism, the dark side of group loyalty that defined in-groups by creating out-groups to despise. But whatever its origins, you're feeling it now. This cold weight in your chest, this persistent wish for someone's elimination, and you don't know what to do with it. Here's a quirky tidbit that might trouble you. Hatred is associated with elevated stress hormones that remain elevated over time. Unlike anger, which produces a spike and then a return to baseline, hatred creates chronic physiological activation that damages the body. The person you hate may never feel the effects of your hatred. You, on the other hand, are being slowly poisoned by it. The saying that hatred is drinking poison and expecting the other person to die isn't just metaphor, it's medicine. You try to analyze the feeling, to find its source, to understand why this particular person triggers such intense antipathy. They've done nothing to you specifically. They've wronged no one you care about. Their existence objectively has no impact on yours, and yet the sight of them tightens your jaw, clenches your fists, generates fantasies of harm you're embarrassed to admit. This is perhaps hatred's most frightening quality. It can be arbitrary. It doesn't require justification, doesn't respond to reason, doesn't care about fairness or proportion. You can hate someone for how they breathe, for how they laugh, for some quality that wouldn't bother you in anyone else but becomes intolerable in them. Hatred creates its own reality, and that reality is impervious to facts. The person moves through their day, oblivious to your animosity. They interact with others, participate in the life of the clan, eat and sleep, and exist without any apparent awareness that someone nearby wishes them gone. Maybe that's for the best. What would happen if they knew? What would happen if hatred met hatred? If the Cold War turned hot? You've seen conflicts escalate. You've seen grudges persist across seasons, souring relationships and fracturing groups. Hatred doesn't resolve itself the way anger does. It calcifies, becoming permanent feature rather than passing state. The clan members who hate each other become sources of instability, flashpoints waiting for triggers, drains on the cooperative energy that survival requires. But knowing hatred's cost doesn't make it go away. The feeling persists, immune to rational critique, demanding expression it probably shouldn't get. You're stuck with it, for now at least. This cold weight, this wish for absence, this strange emotion that makes an enemy out of someone who was never anything at all. Maybe it will fade. Maybe exposure will erode it. Proximity will humanize its object. Time will do what reason cannot. Or maybe it will harden further, becoming permanent, becoming identity. You, as the person who hates, defined by your antipathies as much as your attachments. You don't know yet. You just know the cold and the weight and the troubling clarity that hatred provides. The child isn't yours, not your offspring, not your kin, not even a member of your clan. Just a small human, belonging to a group you encountered while travelling, currently wailing because they've fallen and hurt themselves while their own people are busy with other concerns. There's no reason for you to care. There's no biological imperative, no social obligation, no rational case for getting involved in the distress of a stranger's child. And yet your feet are moving, and yet your arms are reaching, and yet you're picking up this crying small person and making the soothing sounds that seem to come from somewhere deeper than conscious thought, comforting a being whose suffering costs you nothing, and whose well-being benefits you in no way. This is compassion, the emotion that crosses boundaries, and it might be humanity's most remarkable development. Here's what makes compassion philosophically puzzling. It requires feeling the pain of others as if it were your own, even when you have no stake in their outcomes. Your nervous system, optimized for millions of years to pursue your own survival and the survival of your genes, has developed the capacity to hijack that self-interest machinery for strangers. You hurt when they hurt. You want to help when they need help. Something in the architecture of human consciousness has made other people's suffering intolerable in a way that demands action. Historians still argue about the origins of compassion, whether it's an extension of parental care, adapted to create bonds beyond kinship, or whether it emerged from the requirements of large-scale cooperation, where helping strangers today creates networks of reciprocal aid for tomorrow. Whatever its origins, you're feeling it now, holding this child who means nothing to you biologically, whose cries have somehow activated the same circuits that would respond to your own offspring. The child's wails begin to settle as your presence registers. They don't know you, but they know comfort when it's offered, know safety when it surrounds them. Small hands grip your arm with the desperate strength of frightened children everywhere. Their face, wet with tears, turns toward yours seeking reassurance. Here's a quirky tidbit that might warm your heart. Compassion is contagious. Studies show that witnessing acts of kindness, even among strangers, activates reward circuits and makes witnesses more likely to be kind themselves. The act you're performing right now, comforting a child who has no claim on you, doesn't just help this child. It models behaviour for everyone watching, spreading compassion through social learning. The child's own people eventually notice, coming to retrieve their wayward offspring with gestures that combine gratitude and mild embarrassment. You hand the child over, your arms suddenly empty, the connection severed. They disappear back into their own group, this small human whose suffering temporarily became your problem, and you're left with a strange feeling, something like satisfaction but warmer, something like pride but less about yourself. You helped. That's all. You saw distress and responded to it, not because it benefited you, but because that's what compassion makes you do. This will become the foundation of ethics, of charity, of all the ways humans try to reduce suffering beyond their own immediate circles. The capacity you're experiencing right now, extended and institutionalized, will build hospitals and food banks and international aid organizations. It will also be weaponized. Compassion selectively applied can justify terrible things to those excluded from its circle. But in its pure form, it might be the closest humans ever get to genuine goodness. The other group moves on, taking their child with them. Your own journey continues, unchanged except for this small moment of connection across tribal boundaries. The child will probably forget you existed by tomorrow. You'll probably forget them too, one small interaction among thousands. But something has been proven today, something important. Your capacity to care extends beyond kin and clan, beyond reason and reciprocity, into the realm of pure response to suffering. The boundaries you thought defined you, us versus them, mine versus theirs, are more permeable than you knew. Compassion makes the world larger. It makes you larger too. The choice seemed right at the time. In the moment of decision, with limited information and pressing need, you did what you thought was best. And now, in the aftermath, with the full consequences visible in a way they couldn't have been before, you understand with terrible clarity that you were wrong. Not wrong in a small way, not wrong in a way that can be easily fixed. Wrong in a way that will ripple outward, affecting others, changing futures, closing doors that can never be reopened. This is regret, and it's perhaps the most useless emotion humans ever developed. Think about it. Regret is focused entirely on the past, which cannot be changed. It generates suffering in the present about decisions that are already irreversible. It offers no practical benefit. Knowing you chose wrong doesn't undo the choice, and yet consumes mental and emotional resources that could be directed toward anything else. From a purely rational standpoint, regret seems like a design flaw, a bug that some future version of humanity might be wise to eliminate. And yet here you are, feeling it anyway, playing the decision over and over in your mind, imagining all the alternatives you didn't take, constructing parallel universes where you chose differently, and everything worked out fine. Historians still argue about whether regret serves any function. Some suggest it's a learning mechanism, making past mistakes memorable so they won't be repeated. Others see it as a social signal, demonstrating to others that you recognise your errors and can be trusted to make better decisions in the future. But whatever its theoretical function, the feeling itself is pure misery. The pain of knowing what you should have done and knowing you'll never get to do it. Here's a quirky tidbit that might not help at all. People report that their biggest regrets are not about things they did, but things they didn't do. The actions you took, even the wrong ones, tend to fade over time. The opportunities you missed grow more vivid, elaborating into lost possibilities that take on mythic significance. You might be regretting a choice right now, but in the long run, it's the choices you didn't make that will haunt you most persistently. The consequences of your decision continue to unfold around you, visible and inescapable. You watch outcomes you caused, knowing that different choices would have produced different outcomes, unable to intervene in a causal chain you set in motion. This is the unique torture of regret. You're both responsible and helpless, both the author of the disaster and unable to rewrite it. And the past keeps not changing. No matter how many times you replay the moment, no matter how clearly you see what you should have done, the choice remains made. The past is a stone that can be examined from every angle but never reshaped. You're stuck with your decisions in a way that makes freedom feel like a curse, because freedom includes the freedom to be wrong, and wrong endures. You try the mental exercise that philosophers will eventually develop. What if you couldn't have chosen differently? What if your choice was determined by everything that came before? Your brain state, your information, your circumstances, and should have, is just an illusion. This framing is supposed to dissolve regret by dissolving responsibility, but it doesn't really work. The feeling persists regardless of metaphysics. You made a choice. The choice was wrong. You feel bad about it. Determinism doesn't change that. Maybe the only real response to regret is to move forward anyway, to carry the weight without letting it paralyze, to remember the mistake without being defined by it, to use the painful knowledge as fuel for better future decisions while accepting that those too might turn out wrong. Regret in this view isn't something to be eliminated but something to be lived with. A permanent resident in the house of consciousness, uncomfortable but unavoidable. The sun sets on a world shaped by your wrong choice. The stars emerge in patterns that would be the same regardless of what you did. And you sit with the knowledge that can't be unknowed, the feeling that won't dissolve, the regret that time will soften but never fully erase. You'll have more regrets before this journey ends. Everyone does. But maybe that's what makes the non-regretted choices meaningful. They stand out against the background of everything you wish you'd done differently, bright spots in the long record of being human. Someone gives you something, not in trade, not in expectation of return, not even for a reason you can identify. Just a gift. Food they gathered that they didn't need to share, a tool they made that they didn't have to give, a gesture of generosity that seems to demand nothing in response except perhaps this feeling that's flooding through your chest, this warm and somehow humbling sensation that you don't have a name for yet. This is gratitude, the emotion that opens you outward, and it might be the most socially powerful feeling humans ever developed. Here's what makes gratitude interesting. It requires recognizing that you've been given something you didn't earn. That recognition could be threatening. It highlights your dependence, your neediness, your position as a recipient rather than a provider. But instead of feeling threatened, you feel warm. Instead of feeling diminished, you feel connected. Something in the human emotional repertoire has transformed the experience of receiving into a form of pleasure. This transformation isn't trivial. Many species have mechanisms for exchange, for tit-for-tat cooperation where contributions are tracked and balanced. But gratitude adds something extra. A positive emotional response to being helped that makes you want to help in return, not because of calculation, but because of feeling. You're not thinking, I owe them now, so I'd better repay to maintain cooperation. You're thinking, they helped me and I feel wonderful and I want them to feel wonderful too. Historians still argue about whether gratitude is universal or culturally shaped, whether all societies experience and express it the same way. But the basic phenomenon, positive feeling in response to unearned benefit, seems to appear wherever humans appear. It might be one of the foundational emotions for social life, the effective glue that holds cooperative networks together. Here's a quirky tidbit that researchers find fascinating. Expressing gratitude doesn't just make the recipient feel good, it makes the expresser feel good too. The act of saying thank you, or its equivalent, activates reward circuits in your own brain, providing pleasure that reinforces the behaviour. Gratitude creates a positive feedback loop where both parties benefit, where the interaction leaves everyone better off than they started. You look at the person who gave you the gift, trying to communicate what you're feeling through the limited means available. Your posture shifts, opening toward them. Your expression softens. Your hands reach out not to take but to touch, to convey through physical contact the warmth that's flooding through you. You don't have the word thank you yet, but you have the feeling that the word will eventually be invented to name, and the feeling finds expression anyway. The gift itself is almost secondary now. Whatever practical value it has, and it probably has plenty, is overwhelmed by the relational value of the exchange. Someone thought of you. Someone chose to benefit you at cost to themselves. Someone demonstrated through action that your well-being matters to them. The gift is evidence of care, and evidence of care is more valuable than any object could be. This is why gratitude feels humbling. It forces you to acknowledge that you need others, that you can't do everything alone, that your survival and flourishing depend on the willingness of other people to help. For someone trying to maintain an illusion of independence, gratitude is uncomfortable. But for someone who's accepted interdependence, gratitude is sweet. The recognition that you're embedded in networks of care, that others are looking out for you, that you're not alone in a hostile world. The moment passes. The gift becomes yours, integrated into your life, the extraordinary becoming ordinary. But the feeling lingers, that warm gratitude that changes how you see the giver and how you see yourself. You'll look for opportunities to reciprocate, not from obligation, but from desire. The generosity that touched you wants to flow outward, to touch others, to keep the cycle moving. This is how cooperation builds on itself, one grateful exchange at a time. This is how communities form that are stronger than their individual members. This is how humans become more than the sum of their parts. You didn't do anything to deserve the gift. That's the whole point. That's what makes it a gift and not a transaction. And your appropriate response isn't to earn it retroactively, but simply to receive it well, to let the gratitude fill you, to let it change you, to let it flow back into the world as generosity of your own. Thank you. Those words don't exist yet, but you're feeling them anyway. The storm has passed, the ground is wet, the air is heavy, and everything you tried to protect has been scattered or damaged despite your best efforts. You fought the wind and the water with everything you had, and the wind and the water didn't care. The world is not built to accommodate your preferences. The forces that shape it are vastly larger than you, and struggling against them has exhausted you without changing anything. And then slowly something shifts. The tension in your shoulders begins to release. Your clenched jaw relaxes. Your hands, which have been gripping and grasping and trying to hold everything together, open and fall to your sides. You're not giving up exactly, it's not defeat. It's something else, something that feels less like losing and more like letting go. This is acceptance, and it might be the quietest revolution in the whole history of human emotion. Here's what's happening. Your brain is stopping the struggle against what cannot be changed. Instead of continuing to generate distress about the gap between how things are and how you want them to be, some circuit somewhere has decided that the gap is simply okay. Not good, not preferred, but okay. Acceptable. Workable. Something you can live with. This doesn't mean you've stopped caring. Acceptance isn't apathy. The damage around you still matters. You'll clean it up, repair what can be repaired, adapt to what can't. But the emotional suffering, the mental resistance, the constant comparison between reality and desire, that has softened. You're present to what is rather than lost in what should be. Historians still argue about whether acceptance is a natural human capacity or a skill that must be learned. Some suggest it's a defensive mechanism, a way of protecting psychological resources when continued resistance would be too costly. Others see it as a form of wisdom, the recognition that suffering comes not from circumstances, but from our relationship to circumstances. However you understand it, you're experiencing it now, this release into the present moment, this peace that arrives not by changing the world, but by changing your stance toward it. Here's a quirky tidbit that researchers find fascinating. Acceptance seems to work even when you don't believe in it. People who practice accepting difficult circumstances, even skeptically, report reduced suffering compared to those who continue to resist. The shift doesn't require philosophical conversion, just the simple act of releasing struggle, of letting what is be what is, of making peace with reality on reality's terms. The landscape around you settles into its post-storm state. The sky clears gradually, light returning, colours shifting. Birds begin to emerge from wherever they sheltered, beginning the work of rebuilding that is simply what birds do after storms. The world is damaged but continuing, changed but still present, different from before but not ended, and you're part of it, not as a force of control, not as a centre of resistance, but as a participant in the ongoing flow. You'll do what you can do, and let go of what you can't. You'll work with circumstances rather than against them. You'll carry the sadness of loss without being crushed by it, because acceptance makes sadness bearable in a way that resistance never does. This might be the final emotional development, the one that makes all the others livable. Without acceptance, fear consumes you. Without acceptance, grief destroys you. Without acceptance, every gap between desire and reality becomes a wound that never heals. But with acceptance, there's space. Space to feel without drowning, to lose without ending, to continue even when continuation seems impossible. The sun emerges from behind the last clouds. Its warmth touches your face, the same warmth that has touched countless faces before you and will touch countless more after. You're a small part of a very large story, a brief flicker of consciousness in an ancient universe, and that smallness, far from being crushing, becomes almost comforting in the light of acceptance. This is it. This is the moment. This is all there is. And somehow, impossibly, miraculously, it's enough. The fire has burned down to embers now, soft orange glowing in the darkness, pulsing gently like a heartbeat that doesn't need to rush. The stars have wheeled across the sky while we travelled together through this long journey of feeling, and now they hang in their familiar patterns, patient and unchanging, watching over you as they've watched over every sleeping human since your distant ancestors first looked up and felt that beautiful terror of the infinite. Your breath has slowed without you noticing. Your shoulders have released whatever tension they were holding. The blanket or pillow or whoever's warmth you're curled against. Let it receive your weight now. Let it hold you the way you've held yourself all day, all week, all the years of being awake and alert and navigating this complicated world. The emotions we've visited tonight, fear and grief, laughter and loneliness, curiosity and shame, all the loves and hates, the hopes and the regrets, they'll still be there tomorrow. They're part of you now, part of what it means to be human, part of the strange and beautiful machinery that lets you experience being alive. But right now, in this moment between waking and sleep, you don't need to do anything with any of them. They can rest too. The darkness is soft tonight. The sounds of the world are gentle. Maybe that fan humming in the background. Maybe someone else is breathing nearby. Maybe just the quiet pulse of your own existence continuing its ancient rhythm. Let it all fade into the comfortable blur of almost sleep. Let the edges soften, let the stories dissolve into feeling, and the feeling dissolve into rest. You've felt so much tonight. You've travelled so far into the deep history of what it means to have an inner life. And now you deserve to stop travelling, to let the journey pause, to let yourself simply be without needing to understand or analyse or feel anything at all. The embers pulse their slow farewell. The stars hold their vigil, and you, small and brief and miraculous, drift toward the rest that all conscious creatures eventually need, carrying within you all the feelings of 100,000 years, all the emotional discoveries of your entire lineage, all the love and fear and hope that make you human. Sleep well. Tomorrow you'll wake up and feel everything again, but right now, just this once, let it all be quiet. Just this once, let yourself dissolve into peace.